Noel is a sharp-edged young man with one goal: to become the world's strongest seeker, but he ends up stuck with the weakest support class imaginable, a talker. The story kicks off as the Abyss threatens to destroy Noel's hometown. The Abyss is no ordinary forest. It forms when too much mana floods the air, creating a link between the human world and the demon realm, known as the Void. As the Abyss deepens, stronger and more dangerous creatures crawl out of it, and tonight it's hit a depth of 12, enough to summon a deadly monster called the Lord. Noel's grandfather Brandon, once the strongest seeker and known as the legendary Overdeath, is gearing up for battle. As the looming threat draws near, he grips his old weapon, muttering to himself, surprised that he's fighting again after all these years. He orders Noel to stay in the shelter, claiming that help will arrive soon. But Noel knows better that help isn't coming. Brandon is preparing to take on the Lord alone, and Noel realizes his grandfather plans to handle it himself. With his usual legendary confidence, Brandon warns Noel not to doubt him. He asks if Noel's forgotten who he is, Overdeath, a name feared by all. He swears to protect Noel with his life, and as he heads out, Noel calls after him. Then as Brandon steels himself for the fight, his thoughts briefly turn to Noel. He wants to tell him one last thing. Men can never let anyone look down on them, no matter what they face. Meanwhile, Noel stays hidden in the shelter, his mind racing, terror tightening around his chest as dread creeps in. Eventually, unable to stay put any longer, he steps out and finds Brandon gravely wounded. Brandon reflects on his fate, accepting that even Overdeath has his limits. He tells Noel that this is the way of seekers. Choosing a life of battle means living with death constantly at your side. Despite his critical injuries, Brandon asks Noel if he still wants to become a seeker, knowing the risks that come with it. Holding back his emotions, Noel responds with determination, telling his grandfather he'll follow the same path. Brandon, though proud, insists that being a seeker isn't enough. Noel must become the strongest. He asks Noel to promise that he will surpass even him. With a heavy heart, Noel swears he'll become the greatest seeker. Brandon chuckles softly, proud of his grandson. He tells Noel that he loves him, and in that final moment, Brandon passes away, leaving Noel to scream in agony. It's been 2 years since that fateful night, and Noel has kept his word to become a seeker. His team is now locked in battle with a swarm of monsters, and Noel, ever sharp, barks out orders on how to secure a win. Despite being part of the weakest support class called Talkers, Noel wears that title with pride. Then after taking down the monsters, the team gets to work dissecting them. Noel explains that while lesser vampires can't use magic, their queen can spawn hordes rapidly, each one strong enough to rip an ox to shreds. As they plan their next move, a vampire lunges at Noel, but Tanya swoops in just in time to save him. The group discusses going straight for the queen to stop the endless spawns, but Noel advises against it. He reminds them that as a C-rank team, they should focus on thinning out the spawns first, giving them a better shot at victory. His teammates note just how crucial Noel is because his buffs make all the difference in their success, giving him the authority to call the shots. Even though they're ranked lower, they're handling this B-rank mission all thanks to Noel's guidance and skills. Noel takes a moment to reflect on his role. As a talker, his job is to support his team by buffing them to enhance their combat abilities. But his own strength in battle is nothing to brag about. He's entirely dependent on his comrades to fight while he boosts their power from the sidelines. It's why talkers are often laughed at, dismissed as the weakest class. Suddenly, the vampire queen strikes from the shadows, releasing a deadly poison gas that spreads in an instant, throwing the team into chaos. Lloyd and Walter immediately realize they need to save Noel first. They know without his buffs, they're doomed. Tanya then rushes to help, but amidst the confusion, she's hit by the queen. And now, with Noel incapacitated, Lloyd and Walter are struggling to fight back. They're painfully aware that without his support, they can't win this fight. The team, desperate and on the verge of panic, begs Noel to give them orders, reminding him that he's the talker. Anger flares up in Noel as he snaps back, telling them not to look down on him. In one swift move, he pulls out his weapon, ready to show them just what a talker can do. He activates his tactician skill, boosting the entire party's abilities by 25% just by giving commands. Noel then calls out to his brain-dead teammates, telling them to dodge an incoming attack. He then uses his battle voice, instantly increasing the recovery rate of their stamina and mana. Noel orders Tanya to cast a barrier around the two warriors, prepping them to obliterate the beast. But things quickly spiral when more monsters show up. As Tanya starts to panic, Noel uses his peer support skill to calm her down, stabilizing her frantic mind. With a cool head, he sets a timer for 74 seconds and declares he'll handle the small fry while the others focus on the main body. Noel keeps barking out orders, guiding every single move with surgical precision, telling them to prepare their strongest attack. After stunning all the small fry, Noel whips out his magic gun, the only anti-beast weapon a talker like him can rely on. He fires an ice bullet, freezing the demons in place, but one breaks free. Now Noel's down to his last bullet, with only 43 seconds left on the clock. He coolly calculates that the remaining beast will reach him in 23 seconds, giving him just enough time to instruct the team to hit the main body. He gets the command out just in time, right before the beast lunges at him, and his teammates finally unleash their attack, landing the final blow. Tanya, shocked they managed to pull it off, is horrified when she thinks Noel got hit. But Noel, ever the tactician, had it all planned out. His timing was flawless. He dodged the attack just enough while factoring in that the spawns would lose their power once the queen was defeated. The battle ends exactly as he predicted, with the mission wrapped up in 74 seconds flat. Impressed but laughing, his teammates tease him for cutting it way too close with his risky timing. Noel's mind drifts to a memory of his grandfather. As a child, Noel had been frustrated about being a talker, wishing he could be a warrior like his grandfather. But his grandfather, ever reassuring, promised him that his talent would eventually shine through and that he would help Noel become the strongest seeker, no matter his class. Back in the present, Noel silently reaffirms his goal: to surpass his legendary grandfather, even as a talker, the role so many consider the weakest. He begins explaining how Yttria, the capital of the Velman Empire, thrives on the synergy of magic and technology, both derived from research on the beasts they fight. The city depends on seekers to protect it from the abyss, and for that, they are revered as heroes. Later, during a meal with his team, Noel reflects on how, at just 15 years old, he began searching for companions in Yttria, knowing that as a talker, he couldn't fight alone. Walter, beaming with pride over their 5 million Phil reward, talks about their steady progress, while Tanya and Lloyd discuss setting their sights even higher. Noel, meanwhile, quietly considers that their team could really use a scout, but for now he's focused on gaining more experience with his current squad. The conversation takes a turn when a slightly tipsy Walter asks Noel if he's upset about the reward. Teasing him, Walter suggests that Noel cares too much about money, saying that a seeker should have a big heart and not get caught up in greed. Walter's words stir another memory in Noel. His grandfather once gave him some tough but essential advice. He told Noel that seekers must prioritize money, not out of greed, but to buy the best equipment and supplies needed to survive. Being called greedy or evil wasn't an insult, but rather a mark of success. His grandfather, who was known as Overdief, had drilled into Noel one crucial lesson: never let others look down on you, no matter what they say. Jumping back to the present, Noel claims he's not bothered, but Walter keeps badgering him. This ignites a heated back and forth, with Noel jabbing at Walter for always using his age as a badge of authority. After all, for a seeker, skill is what counts. So Noel mocks Walter for leaning on his age to push others around. Walter then enragetedly fires back, accusing Noel of hanging back in fights while others face danger. He reminds him that he puts his own neck on the line to shield the team, but Noel just keeps needling him. Things escalate as Walter threatens to end Noel's life, and Noel, cool as ever, dares him to try. Just then, Lloyd jumps in to break it up, reminding them they're all on the same side. He suggests they split their reward and call it a night, managing to cool things down. Once the mission's over, the team's left with only 250,000 each after paying the clan. Tanya's less than thrilled with the payout, thinking it's peanuts for the work they put in. Lloyd tries to soothe her, saying tough missions like this will come around often, and they'll rake in more on the next one. But Noel chimes in, pointing out that unlike the official clans, they don't get missions straight from the country, which cuts into their chances and cash flow. He reminds them that independent seekers like them don't get these opportunities often, and it's way harder without clan backing. Lloyd then gives the team an update on their total savings, which adds up to just over 12.8 million. Without a second thought, Noel jumps in and proposes using that cash to form their own clan, but Lloyd, ever the cautious one, warns Noel that starting a clan means coughing up 20 million to the country, way more than what they've got. But Noel, full of confidence, says he's ready to drop the remaining 7.2 million from his own stash. His determination is almost maddening. He's convinced that starting a clan will finally get them out of doing these low-tier, hand-me-down jobs and let them grow for real. Even with Lloyd harping on about the crazy costs of renting a base in the capital, but Noel says he's already got a lead on a cheap spot. Lloyd isn't done yet though. He's got serious doubts about whether they can handle running a clan, pointing out that they're just a young, inexperienced C-rank team. He's sure they're not ready for that kind of responsibility, but Noel's not having it. He throws the question right back at Lloyd, asking him when exactly he thinks they'll ever be ready. If they don't make a move now, they'll be stuck as C-rank seekers for life. Noel argues that the only way they'll ever gain the experience they need is by actually running the clan, not by sitting around and waiting for the right time. Lloyd's still worried, saying that without the country's trust, they'll never land the big money jobs they need to make it. Noel fires back, explaining that their youth, their looks, and their strength are exactly what the country wants. The government's hungry for more seekers, and the successful ones aren't just mercenaries, they're idols and heroes. Noel's not done, and he points out that their skills and image can help them rake in sponsorship deals from companies, giving them extra cash and resources. Walter, still shocked by the conversation, can't wrap his head around the idea that being good-looking could actually score them better treatment from the country. But Noel stays confident. He even teases Walter, saying that despite his flaws, even he has the kind of looks that could boost the clan's image. Walter, initially skeptical, slowly comes around to Noel's point. Tired of scraping by with second-hand jobs, he agrees with a plan to form a clan, admitting that status, fame, and money sound pretty tempting. He even cracks a crude joke about using his new status to attract women, which earns him a sharp scolding from Tanya. With Walter now on board, Noel turns to Lloyd, waiting for his opinion as their leader. Then Noel drops a bombshell. If they don't agree to form the clan, he's ready to quit the party and take his share of the savings. The room falls silent as Noel reminds them all of his dream, to become the greatest seeker, even surpassing his legendary grandfather, the Overdeath. Lloyd, caught off guard by Noel's resolve, realizes this isn't something Noel will back down from. After a moment of reflection, he agrees, acknowledging that they'd have to face this decision sooner or later anyway. Tanya, still in disbelief, questions Lloyd's decision, but he calmly reassures her that this was always the path they were headed down. Lloyd suggests they hold off on more talk until they've rested and recovered from the long day and the alcohol. The group agrees to meet again in 2 days to finalize their plans. As everyone heads out, Tanya pauses, seemingly wanting to say something to Noel, but all she ends up saying is a quiet goodbye. The next day, Walter rushes to Noel in a panic, claiming that Lloyd and Tanya have betrayed them, leaving them rattled and unsure what to do next. After reading the letter, Noel quickly pieces it together. Turns out Lloyd sank all his money into bad investments a couple of years ago, and now he's drowning in debt. So to dig himself out of that hole, he embezzled the party's funds and skipped town before anyone could catch on. Noel finds the whole thing ridiculously amusing because Lloyd, the guy who always acted so noble and chivalrous, pulled off the slimmiest move possible. But enough laughing, Noel cuts to the chase and asks Walter when and where he found the letter. Walter explains he caught wind of the great job last night, so he headed to Lloyd's room first thing in the morning to share the news. But by the time he got there, Lloyd had already cleared out. That's when the innkeeper handed over the letter. According to the innkeeper, Lloyd and Tanya left the inn around 8 p.m. the previous night, just before the city gates close. Under normal circumstances, neither Noel nor Walter would have known about this until later in the day, meaning Lloyd was trying to buy as much time as possible before anyone noticed he was gone. It's 9:30 a.m. now, so even though they found out earlier than Lloyd probably anticipated, it's been over half a day. Lloyd and Tanya must have put some serious distance between them and the capital by now. Still, the city gates should have records showing which way they went, and since they most likely left on foot, Noel and Walter could catch up if they grab horses. Walter's raring to go, but Noel reminds him that this isn't just a simple chase to get their money back. Those two chose to abandon the party, and that's outright betrayal. So worst case scenario, if they catch up and confront them, it could end in a fight to the death. And even if they manage to beat Lloyd and Tanya, the money's already gone. But Noel's not about to let them get away without paying for what they did, and they'll suffer, one way or another. After getting dressed, Noel drags Walter down to the local tavern. Walter, confused as ever, doesn't understand why they're even here, but Noel knows it's pointless to explain anything to Walter because he likely wouldn't get it anyway, so he just tells him to follow his lead. As they step inside, Noel immediately grabs the attention of the entire tavern. He then announces that 2 members of his party have stolen their money and fled the capital, offering a reward of 2 million fils to anyone who can bring them back alive. Walter starts panicking, questioning why Noel would announce their situation so publicly. But Noel, calm as ever, explains that there's a particular person he's trying to flush out, so announcing it to the whole tavern is just a time saver. The first group to accept the mission is the Lightning Bite Party, so Noel gives their leader all the details he has on Lloyd and Tanya's escape. Soon enough, several other parties jump on the offer as well, but Noel still hasn't found the person he's looking for. Then a shady-looking man approaches Noel about the job, and immediately, Noel can tell this guy has some useful information, the exact type of person he was waiting for. They step outside to talk, and the man explains he saw a couple leaving town yesterday who perfectly matched the descriptions of Lloyd and Tanya. He claims to know exactly where they're headed, but the problem is that his party isn't strong enough to take them down alone. Sensing an opportunity, Noel offers him 1 million fils in exchange for his help, half the reward. The man tries to argue for the full 2 million, but Noel's already read him like an open book. He knows the guy is too broke to walk away from 1 million fils, so the man eventually gives in and agrees to the deal. With everything settled, Noel tells the man to get his party ready and meet him at the south gate. He also instructs Walter to wait for him there, as Noel has something he needs to take care of first. A little while later, Noel finishes his preparations and heads to the front gate to meet everyone. Walter, clearly unsettled, so he pulls him aside to ask something that's been bothering him. He wants to know if Noel's really okay with fighting Lloyd and Tanya, but Noel, without hesitation, says he has no problem killing them. No mercy and no second thoughts. Walter can't believe how cold Noel is after everything they've been through together as partners. But Noel reveals that from the very day they met, he had already devised contingency plans to take them down if they ever crossed him. In fact, he even has a plan for Walter. Noel never truly trusted any of them, and he tells Walter that being less trusting might do him some good in the future. Later that day in a remote village, Lloyd and Tanya are walking and Lloyd assures her they should be safe for now, so he's confident they can rest easy tonight. In his mind, there's no way Noel would be petty enough to chase them down, especially since the money's already gone. But Lloyd seriously underestimates just how petty Noel can be, and out of nowhere, Noel appears behind them, flanked by a full squad of bounty hunters ready to capture them. Lloyd panically reaches for his sword, but before he can move, Noel uses his ability to freeze him and Tanya in place. Both are left standing there stunned and completely unable to move. And with Lloyd trapped and nowhere left to run, Walter steps forward furiously, yelling at Lloyd for betraying them. He's ready to punch Lloyd right in the face, but Noel stops him because there's something he wants to ask first. Noel knows Lloyd already spent all the party's savings, but he figures the money from the vampire hunt should still be around. But Lloyd panically denies it, claiming he's used that money as well, so Noel unimpressively asks if Lloyd blew it on another one of his failed investments. But Lloyd sweetingly admits that he used the money to pay off more of his debts. The way Lloyd stammers and shifts under pressure gives Noel all the confirmation he needs. It's crystal clear now. Lloyd isn't just a bad investor, he's a full-blown gambling addict. He's likely gambled so much that he's buried under debt collectors, but still, Noel wants to hear it straight from Lloyd's mouth. Then before Lloyd can launch into another apology, Walter snaps, yelling at him for squandering all the money they worked so hard to save. Lloyd, dropping the innocent act, yells back, claiming he's the real victim here. He didn't want to touch the party's funds, but gambling was too fun to resist. And besides, it's their fault for dumping all the responsibility of leadership on him. That's it for Noel. He's had enough of Lloyd's pathetic excuses. So without hesitation, Noel kicks Lloyd square in the face, sending him to the ground and starts stomping on him repeatedly. The audacity of Lloyd trying to shift the blame infuriates him, because Lloyd was the one who begged to be leader. Also, he could funnel money into his gambling addiction. Before long, Lloyd is beaten bloody, pleading for forgiveness, but Noel doesn't even acknowledge the concept. He's more than willing to stomp Lloyd 1,000 times if that's what it takes to feel satisfied. At this point, Tanya desperately speaks up and begs Noel to spare Lloyd. Noel pauses, but only to offer a twisted deal. He'll spare Lloyd if Tanya is willing to take the beating in his place. Noel, ever the equal opportunity punisher, says he has no problem stomping her into the dirt if that's what she really wants. Then, using his power, he compels her to confess her involvement. Under the influence of Noel's ability, Tanya is forced to tell the unfiltered truth. She admits that she gambled the party's money right alongside Lloyd, and shockingly, she's even more of an addict than he is. She even starts blaming Lloyd for losing so often, saying that if she had gambled more, it wouldn't be in this mess because she's better than him at it. Noel's ability forces the target to reveal the absolute truth, no matter how ugly for a brief period. Then when Tanya snaps back to her senses, she's furious and accuses Noel of using mind control on her, yelling that it's against Imperial law. Noel unfazedly agrees with her. It is illegal to use mind control for personal reasons. But he coldly reminds her that she is the criminal here, and what he's doing isn't mind control for personal gain. It's interrogation and perfectly legal in this situation. Now that Noel is done dealing with the traitors, the man who helped him capture Lloyd and Tanya demands his payment. Noel agrees but tells him to wait a minute. But the man is clearly not the patient type, so he grabs Noel and accuses him of trying to scam them out of their money. But Noel calmly drives the man to the ground and assures him he'll get paid for his work, so he'd be wise to shut up and wait. But the man is still pissed off and draws a knife, and he is about to attack Noel. But that's the worst mistake he could have made, because Noel, not one to tolerate threats, immediately knocks the man unconscious with a well-placed punch to the chest. Noel had learned this technique from his grandfather the hard way by being on the receiving end of it. It's a precise strike to the area just above the heart, temporarily paralyzing the heart muscles and causing even experienced fighters to faint if done correctly. Noel's grandfather made sure he mastered it because as a talker, Noel doesn't have the ability to buff himself, so this move gives him at least one solid offensive tool. Then as the man's teammates drag his unconscious body out of the way, a fancy carriage rolls up just in time. The man who steps out is none other than Finocchio Barzini, an infamous slave trader with a flair for the dramatic and surprisingly a friend of Noel's. He's the leader of the Barzini family, and while quite eccentric and flamboyant, he's one of the few people Noel knows who can get the job done. Noel greets him warmly. After all, Finocchio is the key to his plan. And if it wasn't obvious by now, Noel fully intends to sell Lloyd and Tanya into slavery to recoup the money they stole from him. Tanya horrifiedly protests, but Noel quickly reminds her of the alternative. He could easily turn her over to the police. And in this city, jail time means being sent to the mines, a fate far worse than slavery. The mines are brutal, and with a survival rate of just 2% after 10 years of hard labor, Tanya's odds of making it out alive are practically non-existent. Becoming a slave, on the other hand, offers a much better chance of survival, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get lucky and end up with a kind master. With that out of the way, Noel asks Finocchio to evaluate Lloyd and Tanya for sale. After a quick assessment, Finocchio offers $6 million. Noel unimpressively says that's not nearly enough, but Finocchio apologizes, explaining it's a bad time, he can't offer more. The Holy Cross Church is about to impose a decree that everyone must take a vow of poverty, and if Finocchio offered top dollar for Lloyd and Tanya, it would draw too much attention, and that's something he'd rather avoid. Noel, surprised by the church's influence over a family as powerful as the Barzinas, shrugs it off and says that he will take the $11 million. It takes Finocchio a second to process the counteroffer, but when he does, he erupts, accusing Noel of trying to swindle him out of an extra $5 million. Annoyed by the constant yelling, Noel casually bumps the price up again and again, until eventually he's asking for $15 million, well above Finocchio's original $6 million offer. Finocchio, visibly frustrated, is on the verge of losing it, but Noel leans in with a clever deal. If Finocchio buys the two for $15 million, Noel promises to tell everyone that Finocchio paid $30 million instead. The church's decree only restricts overpriced purchases, but if Finocchio spreads the word that Lloyd and Tanya are worth every penny, people will flock to buy them simply because of their inflated value. So if he played right, Finocchio could easily resell them for as high as $90 million. Impressed by Noel's cunning, Finocchio even offers him a leadership role in his family, but Noel unsurprisingly turns it down, so Finocchio understands and agrees to the deal. But before sealing it, he makes his way over to the scruffy guy in his party, issuing a cold warning. If they'd breathe a word of this, they'll face painful deaths. With that said, Finocchio hands Noel a down payment for the two slaves and begins taking Lloyd and Tanya away. Tanya then desperately pleads with Noel not to go through with this, but once again she's met with the cold reality that forgiveness isn't in his vocabulary. She panically turns to Walter, knowing full well that he has a crush on her, so she expects him to step in and save her, but Walter, despite the plea, refuses. Tanya then furiously unleashes a barrage of insults, ripping into him with every nasty word she can think of, and believe me, it's a lot and very nasty. And that shit makes the look on Walter's face priceless, because he never imagined the girl he liked could be so vicious. With the deal finalized, Noel hands over the promised $1 million fills to the shady man and turns to leave with Walter. But just as he walks away, the man calls out, branding Noel as the devil. But Noel, far from insulted, wears the title with pride. In fact, he considers it a badge of honor and vows to use it to his advantage in his quest to become the strongest in the world. After all this shit, Walter's left standing there, questioning his life choices, seriously considering quitting the whole seeker job. But Noel then tells Walter it wasn't his fault. In this job, you're gonna meet a lot of people, and most of them are gonna stab you in the back. Walter might not be the brightest, maybe even a little dumb, but Noel knows he's got a gift for fighting. He wants Walter to stick around, keep fighting by his side, and help rebuild their party. But Walter just can't, because after what happened, he can't see himself living the seeker life anymore. So Noel understands and respects his choice. Then, as Walter leaves the city, Noel wishes him good luck and says goodbye. But as for Noel, he will never give up. Sure, his party's dissolved and it stings, but that won't stop him from becoming the strongest. Then as he walks, he spots some snake scales and thinks, snakes shed their old skin to grow tougher, so that's exactly what he's going to do. It's time to shed the past, rebuild the blue beyond from the ground up, and make it stronger than ever before. The then scene shifts to a girl spotting a recruitment notice posted by Noel, and she thinks to herself, finally I've found him. Later in a tavern, we catch Wolf running his mouth to Noel, saying there's no way he's going to recruit anyone worth a damn with that sad notice. Noel is already fed up and tells him to stop bothering him, but Wolf just won't shut up. He says everyone good enough to join a party is already locked into a clan or another party. Noel, keeping his cool, tells him again to buzz off since it's none of his business, but Wolf, ever the pushy idiot, tries to be all buddy-buddy, saying talkers like Noel can't fight alone, so he should just join his party instead. Noel, not missing a beat, explains that Wolf's party, Lightning Bite, is made up of Wolf himself, the big swordsman, along with the elven archer Lisha and some other skilled members. They're considered rising stars even among C-rank parties. Wolf then keeps running his mouth, saying Noel would make way more money joining them than wasting time trying to form a new crew. But at this point, Noel's patience is wearing thin. Wolf's own party members even step in, telling him to quit it because he's clearly bothering Noel. Lisha then roasts him by saying he's got zero game, and that's why that flower seller girl he asked out rejected him. Wolf's face turns red with embarrassment because his private details are out in the open. But before he can react, Noel hits him with a proposal. They'll join the party, but on one condition. Wolf, thinking it's no big deal, agrees only for Noel to drop the bomb. He wants to be the leader. Wolf's party members are all for it, saying Noel's way smarter than Wolf anyway. Wolf, dumbstruck, agrees but insists that as the founder of the party, he's not giving up his position as leader. Just then, the girl from earlier sneaks up on them, catching everyone off guard. Wolf is floored that this girl managed to slip past Alicia, their so-called expert tracker. The girl then introduces herself as Alma, saying she's here because she saw Noel's recruitment poster. They sit down to talk, and Noel, blunt as ever, kicks things off by asking how old she is, explaining that kids can't be seekers. Alma calmly says she's 21, which as it turns out makes her 5 years older than Noel. Wolf's party, curious as always, starts firing off random questions, and Alma answers every single one without hesitation with a straight face the whole time. Noel then asks Alma about her class and rank, and she casually replies that she's a scout and rank C. Noel thinks to himself that's not bad at all. Scouts and skilled archers are a huge asset in the Abysses. He follows up with one last question, asking why she wants to become a seeker. Alma surprises him by saying she has no real interest in being a seeker. She's only here for him, the grandson of Overdeath. Noel's taken aback, wondering how she knows about his grandfather. Alma then reveals that her grandfather once fought his, and in that battle, her grandfather lost his right hand. Noel immediately wonders if she's here for revenge, but Alma shrugs it off, saying revenge is just a pointless waste of time. She's only interested in seeing what kind of seeker the grandson of Overdeath has become. Noel, still processing all this, tells her that his grandfather is already dead, and he offers a reluctant apology on his behalf. Alma reveals her own grandfather passed away last month too, so she says there's no need for apologies. So Noel, now curious, asks for her grandfather's name, and Alma drops the bombshell. It's Alcor Judicali. The entire tavern freezes. The name alone sends shockwaves, because Alcor Judicali is none other than the founder of the infamous Society of Assassins, a shadowy organization willing to kill anyone for the right price. One of the seekers at the tavern, a guy named Logan, gets pissed, thinking Alma's just making stuff up. Wolf tries to calm him down, saying it's none of his business, but Logan refuses to let it go. He explains that taverns have an unspoken rule. Only seekers of a certain prestige are allowed inside. Alma, playing it cool, admits she didn't know that, so Logan, sensing her inexperience, sneers and labels her a complete noob. He then goes on to inform her that it's customary for regulars to beat up anyone who breaks this unwritten rule. Before Logan can finish, Alma interrupts, turning to Noel and asking what determines a seeker's prestige, so Noel explains that while class and rank are a starting point, in the end it all comes down to strength. Alma, not missing a beat, realizes she just has to beat this gorilla into the ground, which only makes Logan angrier. But it's no use. Alma swiftly defeats him with a chop and a kick, leaving the whole tavern in shock. Noel, impressed by her skills, hires her on the spot. As the tension fades, Alma's stomach growls loudly, and she simply states that she's hungry. The scene then shifts to Alma munching on a fried bun with Noel, thinking to herself, this is so damn good. Noel tells her it's nothing special, but then he realizes she grew up in the mountains, so to her it's a big deal. That's when it clicks for Noel. She really is Alcor's granddaughter. Alma, noticing his reaction, asks if he hadn't believed her until now. Noel admits it was only natural to be skeptical since she made such a bold claim after popping up out of nowhere. But Alma said she believed he was Overdeath's grandson the moment she saw him. She explains it's his eyes. They tell her he's the kind of person willing to do anything to win. She then recalls how her grandfather warned her to never, under any circumstances, fight Overdeath. He told her that Overdeath was unpredictable, and nobody stood a chance in a head-on fight, and Noel's eyes reminded her of that warning. Noel then curiously asks if she was training to be an assassin in the mountains, and Alma confirms and says that she's already met the requirements to become one, though she hasn't officially ranked yet. So Noel puzzledly asks why she didn't join the Assassin Society. Alma explains she tried, and they tested her by making her fight a weak assassin, which she easily won. She was about to kill the guy, following the old assassin rule that the strong survive and the weak must die, but the match referee stopped her. Then when she asked for his real identity, he revealed himself to be Simon Gregory, current leader of the society. That's when Alma found out the society had changed its rules. They no longer kill people on a whim, so Simon told her bluntly that she didn't fit in with the new society and kicked her out. Alma then states that they no longer need assassins trained in the old ways and informs Noel that soon, the Crown will take the society under its wing. Noel, piecing things together, realizes the society is about to be affiliated with the government. Alma nods, adding that they're shifting their focus from contract killings to espionage, because the new leader believes that's the only way they'll survive. Noel, realizing how valuable this information is, nervously hopes he won't get killed just for knowing it. Alma suddenly remembers the info was supposed to be top secret and reassures him, laughing that she'll protect him like a big sister. But Noel's still annoyed, tells her he's not a fan of her playing the big sister role. The scene then shifts to the next day, with Noel and Alma walking through the forest. Noel asks Alma how much she knows about talkers, so Alma says she knows they're weak on their own but have powerful support skills, and their job is to use those to help their party. Noel nods agreeing but adds that it's not as easy as it sounds. One wrong buff and the entire party could be wiped out. He explains that talkers have to assess the battlefield carefully before casting anything, and it's their job to give the right orders to get the most out of their teammates. He emphasizes that a talker's real role is controlling the battlefield, but here's the catch: they can't buff themselves, making them a class that can't survive or fight alone. Alma, confident in his abilities, tells him she's sure he can manage on his own, and Noel, with a half smirk, admits he'd be long dead if that wasn't the case. As they stop by a river, Noel asks Alma to catch a monster for him. He explains that monsters are just flora and fauna that have mutated because of the Abyss, and hunting them is part of every seeker's job. For today, he wants her to hunt a killer rabbit. He shows her a picture of the creature, and Alma amusedly thinks it looks adorable. But Noel quickly warns her not to be fooled. These things are just as vicious as they are cute. He then tells her this hunt will serve as an experiment, and he plans to buff her while she catches the monster. Alma, ever confident, says there's no need for buffs because she can handle the rabbit herself, but Noel tells her that won't work. He explains that it takes time for a person's body to adjust to the buffs a talker provides. To make his point, he asks if she has the Excel skill. Alma confirms that she does, mentioning that it doubles her speed, and she can even stack it to quadruple. Noel presses further, asking if she could use Excel perfectly right from the start. Alma admits that it took time and training for her body to handle the skill, so Noel tells her it's exactly the same with buffs. She'll need time to adjust to the new abilities that buff provides, and her compatibility with his buffs will determine how effective their future strategies will be. He mentions that it took half a month for his previous party to get used to his buffs, and Alma finally got his point. Noel then asks her how many killer rabbits are nearby, and Alma, without missing a beat, tells him there are 13 within a 200-meter radius. Noel then kicks off the test, buffing Alma with Battle Voice and Tactician. He then explains that as long as she follows his orders, her abilities will be enhanced. Alma immediately feels a strange energy surging inside her, so Noel then instructs her to max out her Excel skill, saying she can now boost her speed sixfold. And then he tells her that the challenge is to catch a single killer rabbit in under 10 seconds, so without wasting any time, the test begins and Alma sprints through the forest, not only catching one rabbit, but gathering several. Then when she hands them over, Noel is stunned to find that she caught all 13 rabbits in the area and in just 8.6 seconds. He's impressed by how fast she adapted to his buffs and figures there's no need for further training, and with a grin he tells her they're ready for their first quest as a party. Noel then reveals that a small town named Mince, which they recently cleared of monsters, has sent him a request to deal with a group of thieves terrorizing the villagers. The scene then cuts to the two of them riding in a carriage, and Alma, experiencing a carriage ride for the first time, enjoys the moment, but Noel warns her that her excitement won't last long because by the end of the ride, her ass will feel like a rock. As they ride, Noel fills the time by explaining the types of jobs seekers typically handle. Aside from fighting beasts born from the abysses, seekers also hunt down criminals, monsters, and treasure. There are also mythic hunts where seekers explore uncharted territories. The bandit problem they're about to deal with usually falls under the Lord's responsibility, but sometimes the Lords are slow to act, so people turn to secrets for help instead. Alma doesn't like the sound of this, and Noel admits they won't be paid much since their client is just a farming village, but still he thinks it'll be a good trial run for their party, so Alma is excited for their first mission, and that reminds Noel of his old party, stirring up memories of the past. The scene then shifts to Noel and Alma stopping in a town called Eudora for the night. As predicted, Alma's complaining that her butt is as hard as a rock after that long carriage ride, and Noel, with no sympathy, tells her they're hopping on another carriage to Mince tomorrow. They start looking for an inn, but everywhere they check is full. After a frustrating search, they finally manage to find one with a single room. Noel's relieved and tells Alma to take the bed while he'll crash on the floor. Alma, ever casual, tells him she doesn't mind if he sleeps with her, seeing as she thinks of him like a younger brother. Noel, blushing furiously, refuses, and seeing his reaction, Alma teases him, thinking it's cute. This only irritates him more, so he stomps off to take a bath. Later, as Alma stretches, Noel walks out of the bath half naked. Alma's surprised by his well-toned muscles, thinking he's got a pretty great body, but always blunt, she thinks it's a shame. No matter how much he trains, he's never going to be on the same level as frontline fighters. She tells him that hard work can't outshine raw talent and mentions that if he were a warrior like Overdeath, he might have been the ultimate seeker. This really gets under Noel's skin, but he takes a deep breath and asks her to close her eyes. When she does, he flicks her forehead, telling her to mind her own damn business. Then he coolly tells her to take her bath while he gets some sleep. As Alma heads off to bathe, Noel lies down on the bed, thinking that he's all too aware that he's not naturally talented. He then recalls his grandfather's promise, that he'd make Noel the strongest seeker despite his class, and as he drifts off, he still hears his grandfather's words echo in his mind. The next day, we see them roll into the village they were heading to, and the chief greets them, surprised as hell to find just two of them there. Noel casually lets him know the others quit the party, and it's down to just the two of them now. But of course, he reassures the chief with a cocky grin that he should relax because they will gonna get the job done, and the chief throws him a shaky smile like he is not entirely convinced. They then sit inside, and the chief's wife serves them some tea. While sipping, Noel catches the chief's daughter sneaking glances at him from across the room, and when he notices, she quickly ducks out of sight with embarrassment. The chief then explains that she's at that difficult age, adding that she's been excited about their visit. Noel figures she must be let down that their dashing leader isn't around, but little does he know she's actually got her eyes on Noel. Noel then shifts the conversation, asking the chief if the band of thieves numbers around 20. The chief nods and adds that the thieves recently ransacked a nearby town, leaving behind not just stolen goods but body count too, and even worse, they kidnapped some of the women. Noel then asks him for their hideout location, and the chief says it's a rocky clearing in the eastern forest. Noel figures this is enough to work with, so he moves on to the matter of payment. Straight-faced, he says they'll need $200,000 upfront and another $300,000 when the job's done. The chief agrees on the spot and hands over the advance without a second thought. Noel verifies the payment and muses that he half expected the chief to haggle a bit. He notices that scraping together that money must have been tough for them. And as he heads out, he reassures the chief by promising to return once the job's done. The scene then shifts to Noel and Alma trekking through the forest when Alma suddenly huffs, telling Noel that the chief couldn't keep his eyes off her chest the entire time. She calls him a disgusting pervert, ranting about how shameful it was, especially in front of his own daughter and wife. Before Noel can respond, the chief's daughter comes running after them, asking if they're really going to take down the thieves. Noel gives her a confident smirk and reassures her that they'll make quick work of it. She wishes him luck, saying she'll be rooting for him, and shyly asks if he remembers the bamboo dragonflies she's holding. Noel nods, recalling that he was the one who taught her how to make those. She beams, telling him that her dragonflies fly higher than any of the other kids, but this one is the very one he gave her, and she's kept it as her most prized possession ever since. Noel finds this sweet, and she blushes, telling him to hurry back because she and her mother are going to cook something special for him and Alma. After she leaves, Alma raises an eyebrow and smirks, teasing Noel about having the little girl wrapped around his finger. Noel gets annoyed, so he tells her to shut up and dubs her the big-boobed bimbo, which she clearly doesn't appreciate. The scene then shifts to them scoping out the thieves' hideout under the cover of night, and they quickly realize there are way more than 20 thieves here. Noel's brow furrows as he thinks no ordinary gang of lowlifes would gather such numbers. Then his eyes catch sight of the boss, a man he instantly recognizes as Gordo the Razor Blade. Alma doesn't know him, so Noel explains that Gordo has a bounty of $2 million on his head, and he can't believe this guy is still breathing. Noel then turns to Alma and tells her that Gordo is a B-rank bandit in the scout class, so he worriedly asks if she can take him. Alma confidently says yes, but only if it's one-on-one. Noel gets it and tells her to leave the rest to him, but she is surprised and reminds him that the enemy will spot him if he gets any closer because she can conceal herself with her skill, but he can't. Noel with grins tells her that he's already got a plan, and with that he quickly explains it. Then Alma slips into the enemy camp using her stealth skill. Noel then taps into his link skill to communicate with Alma, and she lets him know once she's in position. Then without wasting a second, Noel unleashes a howl skill, stunning all the bandits except for their leader. He then quickly orders Alma to take out Gordo, so Alma with her quintuple Excel speed stakes Gordo in the lower back with a single deadly strike. And then the howl's effect fades, so Noel tells her to keep the remaining enemies occupied until he can get there. And Alma happily goes to work, hacking away at the bandits one by one with a creepy smile. So Noel can't help but notice that she's starting to enjoy the bloodbath a bit too much, and he grimly realizes she might be trouble down the line. When he finally arrives on the scene, he warns Alma and then throws a flash grenade, blinding the enemies. While they're stumbling around, Noel fires off his flame bullets, burning them off while they're stunned. The scene then jumps to them back at the chief's house, and the chief, nervously eyeing the bag in Noel's hand, asks what happened with the thieves. Noel casually stands out the severed head of their boss Gordo and then demands the rest of the payment. The chief, relieved but a little shaken, invites him to stay for dinner before heading out. As they eat, the chief mentions that his daughter has been assessed as a swordsman, and then she shyly admits that she wants to become a seeker like Noel, but she's unsure if she can pull it off. Noel tells her that anyone can, but then he explains that she just needs to register with the government to become a seeker and then enroll in the training school in Etrai. The school's free, but she'll need to cover her living expenses, so he advises her to start saving now. He also suggests that she could gain some experience as a supporter, explaining that supporters are basically errand runners for seekers. It's not a common path, but she'd at least get to see how the pros handle things. The girl then eagerly asks Noel if she can join Blue Beyond once she becomes a strong seeker. Noel promises her that if she really does become strong and if he's still the kind of seeker she looks up to by then, he'll let her join. She gets all excited, practically glowing, as the village chief and his wife bring out some wine. The chief proudly tells them to enjoy it, saying it cost him 100,000 and that he's been saving it for a special occasion. Noel then gives the wine a sniff and can tell right away that it's top-shelf stuff, or so it seems. But he humbly insists he's just a guest and can't take the first sip, so he suggests the chief should be the one to try it first. The chief stammers, trying to back out, claiming that he doesn't drink. Noel raises an eyebrow, baffled that the guy would spend 100,000 on wine when he doesn't even drink. Then Noel drops the bomb, telling the chief to go ahead and take a sip of his poisoned wine. The chief freezes and quickly insists he hasn't poisoned anything, swearing he has no reason to, but Noel smirks and tells him that he could just take their money and gear once they're dead and wouldn't even need to pay them. The chief then nervously asks if Noel has any real reason for this wild accusation, but Noel cool as ever gives him 3. First, he points out that a guy who lies about the number of thieves just to skimp on the reward isn't about to pop open a 100,000 wine. Second, by the smell alone, Noel can tell it's nothing but cheap liquor, already starting to spoil, meaning it's been opened a while ago. And third, the chief's thirst for blood has been obvious ever since he brought out the bottle. Alma then chimes in, saying they're not fallen for his lousy acting, and reminds the chief that scouts like her have a tolerance to poison, so it wouldn't have worked on her anyway. But the chief desperately insists that they have no proof, so Noel leans to him with a scary look and tells him to just drink the damn wine. The chief gets panicked, throws the wine aside, and snaps, telling Noel to shut up, saying he doesn't have to listen to him. Noel then uses his confess skill on the chief, and under its power, the chief admits that he did poison the wine, and we see that his daughter stands there horrified by that. Then, without a second thought, Noel ruthlessly gouges out one of the chief's eyes right in front of her, coldly telling him that he's just getting started. He warns the chief that his other eye is next, followed by the rest of his body parts. The chief, panicking and in agony, begs for forgiveness, offering to pay the 300,000 he still owes. But Noel flatly says that's not enough. After all, the man just tried to kill him, and because of that, he demands every last coin in the house. The chief, trembling, explains that he can't, he has debts to pay. Noel doesn't care and moves in for the next eye, but just then, the chief's daughter runs into the house. The chief then desperately blurts out that he's borrowed money from the Gambino family, a mafia group, and if he misses the payment, they'll kill him. But Noel unfazedly says that he doesn't give a damn, and he is about to start the torture when the daughter rushes back with all the coins in the house, a total of 820,000, and she tearfully begs Noel to spare her father's life. The chief desperately tells her not to hand over the money, warning that the Gambinos will kill them both if they can't pay. But his daughter ignores him and hands it all to Noel. Noel takes the money and leaves without a second glance, but as he walks away, the girl shouts after him, saying with a broken heart that she hates seekers now. Out in the forest, Alma glances at Noel and asks if he's alright. He brushes it off, saying he's fine, but Alma isn't convinced and pushes further, asking if he's really okay after crushing a girl who once admired him. And then she tells him it must have hurt, but Noel simply replies that he's not afraid of disappointing people. Alma then teases him by saying that he can always lean on his big sis when things get tough, but Noel clearly isn't into that idea. They then spot a flying airship in the distance, and Noel quickly identifies it as belonging to the Goat Dinner clan, a 3-star regalia. Alma then curiously asks what a regalia even means, so Noel explains that it signifies a clan officially recognized by the Empire. There are 7 regalia clans, but they're not on equal footing. Their rank depends on their strength and accomplishments. At the bottom are 4 3-star regalias, above them are 2 2-stars, and at the very top there's a single 1-star regalia. One of the perks of being a regalia is the right to own an airship, and Alma figures a ship like that must be packed with powerful people. Noel nods, adding that they're not just powerful, they're the best of the best in terms of wealth, experience, and guts. He then casually mentions his plan to become part of the regalia within a year, a goal that reminds Alma of when she took the test for the Society of Assassins. After the test, she'd asked the leader if she passed. He told her that in terms of combat prowess, yes, she had. But Alma confusedly wondered what else there could be. So the leader said that all she needed to do was answer a simple question, and he asked her if she were the one who killed Alcor, the previous head of the Assassin Society. Without hesitation, she admitted it. She explained that even the so-called God of Assassins was an easy target once the senility hit him. Then he asked her why she did it, and Alma unfazedly questioned whether there was even a point to that inquiry. The leader shrugged, saying it was just idle curiosity, but he figured something out. Alma wasn't Alcor's grandchild like everyone thought. She was actually his daughter. She confirmed this, revealing she was just one of many children born from the women Alcor had kidnapped from various villages. She then recalled being forced to fight other kids her age when she was just a child, explaining that Alcor had been obsessed with creating an equal. He wanted to be reborn but stronger, so he decided to craft an invincible version of himself after losing to Overdeath. All of her siblings were sacrificed in this twisted quest of his, and she was the only survivor, his greatest success. Simon then told her bluntly that she wasn't fit to be part of the society, so she shockingly asked him why. He explained that while she was undeniably strong, she wasn't suited for what the society was becoming. They were about to transform into a government agency, and while they continue killing, it would no longer be their sole purpose. Killing would just be a means to an end, not the ultimate goal like before, and he added that this shift was necessary to secure their future. Alma then became enraged and broke down. She then started saying that she spent 21 years being trained to be a killer, and now all of that felt meaningless. She cried out that she'd never had any fun, never fallen in love because her life had been stolen by this brutal training. And now, after all that shit, he was telling her they didn't need her, so she snaps like a maniac, demanding to know what the last 21 years of her life had even been for, and angrily asked him to give her life back. She then started feeling lost and wondered aloud what she was supposed to do now, so Simon not unkindly told her that she'd have to figure that out on her own. But before leaving, he mentioned something intriguing. He'd recently heard that Overdeath's grandson was now a seeker in Atrai, so Alma curiously asked if he was strong. Simon replied that he is, but his class is Talker, the weakest class of all. Still, he suggested she go check him out if she was interested. The story then shifts back to the present. Alma, moved by her memories, suddenly hugs Noel, promising with a loving look that she'll always fight by his side. The scene then shifts to a guy knocking out a security guard, and he uses his powers to disguise himself as the guard. Then he heads to the guard's post, casually asking the other guards stationed there if the death row inmate is inside that cell. The guard responds, confirming that the prisoner is there, but adds that he's surprisingly well behaved, barely making his presence known. Turns out, this silent inmate is the infamous killer who had the entire city of Itrai shaking in their boots, and his name is Hugo Capelia, and known as the Puppeteer. Meanwhile, we see Noel running, carrying some serious weight in the early morning. He explains that this is his daily grind, running 2 laps around the castle walls like clockwork. He never skips it, no matter how exhausted he might be. He then recalls the hellish training his grandfather put him through, starting from the day Noel announced he would become a seeker. That was the day his kind and gentle grandfather disappeared, replaced by a ruthless drillmaster. Noel endured brutal training day in and day out, knowing that since seekers can enhance themselves with magic, all he could rely on was his body. He threw his heart and soul into the training, refusing to back down until the bitter end. Later, we see Noel in the shower, thinking back to Alma's comments about how well-maintained his body is. Despite all that work, it's of little use to him since he's a talker, not a frontline fighter. After stepping out of the shower, Alma shows up for a visit. Noticing Noel's lodgings, she smugly remarks that she figured he'd have a nice room. He asks her how her room is and if she's settled in. She says it's not great, but manageable. Noel then points out she's early and reminds her they had agreed on a different timing. She teases him by asking if he's not happy to see his big sister sooner and wonders aloud if she can touch him. But before he can even respond, she starts touching him, getting on top of him on the bed. As Noel tries to stop her, Alma tries to steal a kiss, thinking he's cute, but Noel shuts her down with a swift headbutt just in time. Later, we see the two of them strolling through town, and Alma, still salty, wonders how Noel could headbutt a girl, but Noel, not missing a beat, says he had every right since she practically tried to assault him. So Alma just smirks and teases him again, saying it's his own fault for being so damn cute. As they walk, she spots a couple holding hands and without hesitation, grabs Noel's hand, declaring they're on a date, and then she cheekily asks where he's taking her today. For starters, they head to the Appraisers Guild, where Noel explains this is where classes get praised and where rank-ups happen. He adds that being an appraiser is a unique class, exclusive to gnomes, and they can't rank up. He mentions the gnomes are a strange bunch, almost like they exist just to research classes. As they look around, they spot one of the gnomes helping his seeker rank up. Noel casually asks Alma what she's planning to do since she's got the mark showing she's ready for a rank up. It's explained that when someone's ready to level up, a brand appears on their body, usually on the back of the hand or the chest. Alma, in classic Alma fashion, jokes it would be very cute if Noel's mark ended up on his adorable butt, but Noel groans, asking her to knock it off, and then wonders if she's going to become an assassin. She shrugs, saying she hasn't decided yet, and flips the question back at him, asking what he thinks she should do. Noel admits he has no clue, but adds that becoming an assassin could be useful. though they'll need to avoid overlapping skills when they recruit more people. Alma's surprised at the mention of recruiting others, and Noel clarifies that they obviously can't tackle the Abyss on their own, so yeah, he plans to bring in at least one more person. So he asks her to hold off on ranking up for now and says they'll just explore her options today. After finishing up at the guild, Alma, munching on some buns, asks where they're headed next. Noel replies that they should hit up the smithy he frequents, reminding her that as seekers they need to keep their weapons in top shape. They arrive at the smithy, and the moment they walk in, the dwarf working there practically loses his mind, ogling Alma's giant black melons, without a shred of shame. And that shit was enough to ruin the visit. Their next stop is the skill bookstore, where Noel explains that it's a place specializing in skill guides. He asks the store owner to recommend some solid skills for a C-rank scout, and she gets right on it. Ready to leave, Noel turns, but Alma stops him, asking if he's not going to browse a bit. He reminds her that skill guides are sorted by class, so he needs to hit a different store for his own skills. They agree to meet up later, and as he heads out, he says with a warning that her budget is 1 million, so he warns her not to blow the cash, and she agrees. But later when they meet up again, Alma's lugging around a massive teddy bear. Noel can't believe that she wasted the money even though he warned her not to, but she quickly defends herself, showing off the armor-piercing skill she bought, explaining it's a projectile skill that cuts a target's defense in half, and it cost her 800,000. So she spent the leftover 200,000 to get herself this teddy who looks like Ted, as it's going to serve as a replacement for Noel as her body pillow, and that makes Ted so lucky. She then asks him if he didn't buy anything for himself, and he says that the book that he wanted to buy was out of his budget. He then explains that he had his eye on an exorcism skill, which can instantly wipe out undead, but it had a ridiculous price tag of 30 million. Suddenly, Noel spots someone passing by, and without much explanation, he tells Alma he'll be back soon, as he has some business to take care of. Alma isn't thrilled, but lets him go. Next, we see Noel in a shady part of town, meeting up with a guy named Loki. Noel asks why they had to meet in this dump, pointing out they could have talked anywhere, so Loki says that he's walking a fine line and doesn't want to be spotted. He then hands Noel a letter with the information Noel had requested on a particular prisoner. As Noel skims the info, Loki raises an eyebrow and asks if Noel's really serious about recruiting a killer who had the entire city of Yttria shaking in its boots. Noel's convinced that Hugo was framed, which is why he's going to investigate and prove his innocence. Loki just shakes his head, calling Noel weird. First, he sold his party mates as slaves, and now he's trying to rescue a death row inmate to bring him into his party, so he wonders aloud if Noel's got a few screws loose. But Noel, ever the smooth operator, takes it as a compliment. He then thanks Loki for the intel, adding that he'd expect nothing less from Faceless, the best informant in the capital. Loki with a smirk says that flattery isn't gonna get him anywhere, all while morphing into different people like it's no big deal. Then he coolly explains that he's an imitator, a class that can copy anyone's appearance. He also brags that he can slip into any facility with no problem, and Noel adds that even appraisers can't fully wrap their heads around what imitators can do. Noel's not even sure if the face he's looking at right now is really Loki's, and then he hands over the payment for the investigation. But before Loki walks off, he throws Noel some bonus intel because Noel's a regular. He lets him know that a nasty new drug is spreading like wildfire in the area. The high is unbeatable, but the downside makes people so angry they're stabbing each other left and right. Noel can't help but think that only an absolute moron would be pushing a drug like that, especially since the Lucianos are bound to come down hard on them. But then Loki says that the ones distributing the drug are actually a subfamily of the Lucianos. Noel then remembers that this turf belongs to the Gambino family, currently under the control of Albert Gambino, and Loki doesn't mince words, calling Albert a total psycho. Meanwhile, we cut to Alma, absolutely furious that Noel hasn't shown up yet. She's angrily binge-eating, thinking to herself that Noel just doesn't understand women at all. Lisha notices Alma's frustration, and the scene switches to Noel strolling through the slums. His mind is on the fact that the old boss of the Gambino family is dead, and now his son is running the show. Looking around at the mess the Gambinos are running now, Noel feels disgusted. The old boss was a good man, even Finocchio respected him, and there's no way he would have allowed this dangerous drug to flood the streets. As he walks, Noel spots a beggar with unusual features. Guessing the guy's an immigrant, Noel feels sorry for him. Thinking this poor soul is going to die far from home, so out of pity, he drops a coin as he walks past. But the beggar, clearly not wanting charity, tries to give the coin back, thinking Noel dropped it by mistake. Then, in a moment of pure awkwardness, the beggar warns Noel that this isn't a safe place for a girl like him. Noel, already irritated, snaps back that he's a man, not a girl, and the beggar stumbles over an apology. Noel then snaps, telling the guy he doesn't want that dirty money anymore since it's been tainted by his filthy hands. He turns to leave, but the idiot chases after him, so Noel gets annoyed and kicks him down, and with a sneer he tells him not to touch him and know his place. The guy, now on the ground and looking up at Noel's sneer, gets a flashback of someone else treating him the same way, so anger flares up in him. He then says he doesn't like fighting, but he's got to stand up for himself, and he takes a fighting stance. Noel, noticing this isn't just some street thug, realizes the guy has skill. The guy now gets serious and warns Noel to apologize, but when Noel refuses, he lunges at him. Noel dodges easily and they trade blows, but Noel's clearly the stronger one. The guy, breathing heavily, is impressed, saying Noel's moves are terrifying. He even wonders out loud if Noel is some kind of ninja. Noel then explains that ninjas are a scout subclass only found in an island nation to the east, and he pieces together that this guy must be from there. He then reveals to the guy that he's actually a talker. The boy looks surprised, but seeing how tough Noel is, he doesn't back down. Instead, he releases his aura ready to attack, saying he's about to use his real skills now. Noel gets intrigued and thinks maybe he's struck gold with this one and shifts into a serious fighting stance to test the guy's abilities. Just as they're about to clash, a goofy-looking guy, shorter than a dwarf, waddles over and interrupts. He calls the guy by the name Kuba, asking why he's fighting when he was told to sit tight. Meanwhile, we cut to Licia, who's with Alma. She finds out Alma still hasn't picked a class, and Alma goes over her 4 options: assassin, torturer, chaser, and bandit. She explains that she's got the strongest affinity for assassin and chaser, but Licia points out how tough it must be deciding whether she wants to fight on the front lines or not. Alma agrees, saying it really depends on the rest of her party, which is why she's been putting it off for now. Licia then thinks out loud and wonders if maybe Noel's out there right now hunting for new party members. Back in the slums, the short guy starts scolding Kuba for his actions, and he uses the ring on his hand to punish him. Noel quickly realizes that Kuba must have made an oath of submission to this guy, and the ring lets its wearer control the one who made the oath. He points out that using such a device is illegal, unless of course the person is a slave. Then the short guy, who's shorter than a wiener, asks Noel who he is, and naturally he makes the classic mistake of assuming Noel's a girl. The idiot even tries to get a little too pervy, but Noel shuts him down fast with a swift kick. Noel then pulls out his gun, aiming it right at the little creep, and asks where he's from. The guy admits he's from Soldelin, but refuses to explain why he's here. Of course, Noel isn't having any of that, so with some added persuasion, the guy finally spills the truth. He says he had to flee Soldelin because he got caught running an underground fighting ring for the Alembert family and was skimming profits off the top. Noel puts the pieces together, realizing the guy's hiding out here because the Gambino family is more powerful than the Alemberts, and they can't reach him in this territory. Noel asks if Kuga is his gladiator, and the guy confirms it. Noel figures out his plan. He's going to force Kuga to fight in an underground ring, aiming for prize money to get back into the business. The guy admits Noel's got it all figured out, but he still thinks Noel is a woman, so he asks if he's involved with the fighting rings. Noel sets him straight, saying he's a seeker, and by the way, a man. The sudden gender reveal completely shocks the little guy, which pisses Noel off even more. Noel thinks to himself that no one's going to care if he kills this guy. After all, the Alembert family isn't about to come looking for a runaway thief. Plus, Kuga would be free once the guy's out of the picture. Noel then pulls the trigger, but we don't see where the bullet lands. Meanwhile, Licia the homewrecker is chatting with Alma, mentioning that Noel's recruitment poster is still up in the town square, so maybe someone's contacted him. Alma, still annoyed that Noel left in the middle of their date, admits this is just typical Noel behavior. But Licia jokes that he might be recruiting some new promising member right now. Alma doesn't mind because she's convinced she's all the partner Noel needs. But she warns, if anyone else shows up, she'll kill him. We then see that Noel intentionally misses his target when he takes his shot and smirks and tells the short man Miguel to scram, giving him a 10-second head start. Miguel frantically wakes his servant, and as they prepare to bolt, Noel muses that a guy like Kuga doesn't need rescuing because he's more than capable of getting free on his own. Then as he watches them flee, he mutters that he doesn't need some star of dog tagging along in his party, he needs a true ferocious wolf. Later, Noel heads back to meet Alma, but he is surprised to find Licia there too. He raises an eyebrow, asking why she's here. She simply thanks him for the meal, but Noel snaps back that he never said he'd pay, so Licia shoots him a look, wondering if he's not even going to apologize for bailing on their date. Alma, visibly irritated, chimes in by saying that she would have been eating alone if Licia hadn't shown up. Sensing her frustration, Noel gives in and agrees to pay the bill for both of them. As they settle in with coffee, Licia casually asks if Noel was out recruiting for his party. This brings Kuga to Noel's mind, but he shrugs it off, saying no, he was out for something else. He then turns to Licia, asking if she's heard about a dangerous drug making rounds recently. Licia nods and asks why he's curious. Noel explains that the drug is incredibly potent, but has a nasty side effect of triggering uncontrollable rage. He mentions that it's spreading unchecked and asks Licia to tell Wolf's gang to be on alert. Licia finds it strange for Noel to be concerned about them, and he brushes it off by saying that he's just sharing info as a business partner. Licia then gets up to leave, saying it's time for her to get to work. She turns to Alma saying they should get together again, but next time not as business partners, but as friends. Alma lights up at the idea, suggesting they should be best friends. Licia agrees and then invites Noel to join them, but he just waves her off, telling her to go away. After she leaves, Noel reflects that since even Licia has heard of this drug, it's likely spreading beyond Gambino's territory, and he hopes it won't blow up into a major issue. The scene then shifts to the Gambino family base, where Miguel and Kuga are now captives. They stand before the formidable Albert Gambino, the family's ruthless head. Albert then remarks that he can't let them get away with stealing from the Alembert family, adding that the Alembert head has ordered Miguel to be handed over the moment he's found, and Miguel realizes this is the last person he'd ever want to be caught by because he knows Albert Gambino isn't just dangerous, he's a full-on madman, practically a devil incarnate. Albert, however, says that it would be too dull to simply hand him over, adding he has no interest in working for a backwater family like the Alemberts. Miguel, seeing an opportunity, tries to charm his way out, agreeing that a noble family like the Gambinos shouldn't stoop to serve the lowly Alemberts. Albert agrees, and with a wicked gleam in his eye, says that he has a much better idea. They'll hand them over to the Alemberts as stuffed toys. Miguel stares and horrifiedly tries to process what Albert means until Albert spells it out. He's going to skin them alive, pack their remains into sacks, and gift them to the Alemberts. Miguel's face drains of color, while Kuga strangely feels relieved. He thinks that maybe now, he'll finally get the death he's been hoping for. But before Albert can carry out his plan, the chief of Mintz's village arrives, desperate to speak to him about a pressing debt. The chief explains his situation, and Albert quickly learns that the chief had every intention of repaying, but a rogue seeker named Noel robbed him of everything he had. According to the chief, he tried to resist, but Noel took his wife and daughter hostage and gouged out his eye, leaving him with no choice. He adds that Noel told him if he had money to spare for the puny Gambinos, he might as well hand it over to him instead. Albert's anger simmers as the chief goes on, trying to stoke his fury against Noel to save his own skin. Albert announces that this Noel will indeed need to be brought to justice for his audacity. However, he then tells the chief he'll be expecting his payment, and while the chief is relieved, Albert adds that he'll still have to face the consequences for the delay. The chief then desperately mentions that he has no money left, but Albert already knows this and calmly states that he'll just take the chief's right arm instead. He then glances at Kuga, who's known as a long swordsman, someone skilled at slicing things up, and asks him to remove the chief's arm using nothing but his own wooden crutch. Miguel quickly orders Kuba to hurry up and follow Albert's command, but just before Kuba begins, Albert casually pops a drug to send himself into a state of euphoria, grinning that he needs his medicine to fully enjoy the bloodshed. As Kuba moves in to slice the chief's arm, the chief scoffs, thinking there's no way Kuba can pull it off with a stick. But Kuba cuts through his hand like it's nothing. Impressed by this brutal skill, Albert is delighted, and Miguel seizes the moment, proudly claims that Kuba is a gladiator he personally trained, and offers him to Albert as a gift of friendship. The scene then shifts, and we see Kuba donning new armor as he becomes Albert's slave. As he suits up, memories flood back. His mother was once known for her beauty, and his father was a successful merchant. They had a good life, and once when they visited a temple to pray for a healthy child, they were ambushed by bandits. The bandits struck his father unconscious, and when he awoke, he was devastated to find his wife violated and traumatized. This incident plunged Kuba's mother into despair, and months later, she gave birth to him. But Kuba's father looked at the child with resentment, barely able to see him as his own. One day, as Kuba's mother was caring for him, she sadly asked his father to look at their son, but his father only muttered doubts, sinking her even deeper into depression. That same night, Kuba's mother ended her own life, and from that point on, his father drowned himself in alcohol. Kuga, desperate for some parental affection, tried to bond with his father, but was pushed away every time. Even the maids looked at him with disdain, thinking it might have been better if he died alongside his mother. Kuga grew up feeling unwanted, and one morning he woke up to find himself on a boat, and he soon realized he'd been sold into slavery. This was where he first met Miguel, who introduced himself as his master. Miguel then threw him into the brutal world of underground gladiator matches, and when Kuga won his first fight, Miguel praised him, and that moment brought Kuga to tears, as it was the first time anyone had ever given him approval. But the happiness was short-lived, as he quickly realized he was still nothing more than a slave. Back in the present, Kuga stands ready in his new gear, preparing himself for whatever fate awaits. The scene then shifts to Noel waiting in an old building, asking Loki why he called him out here. Loki tells him it's because he's a valuable customer, and he wanted to share some free info, and he spills that the Gambino family is out for his head. He then lays out the whole situation, and Noel quickly realizes that Albert Gambino must have swallowed the lies spun by the chief of Mint's village, and now they're gunning for him. Noel thinks that Albert must be a fool to fall for such a trick, and Loki nods, calling the Gambino boss a total madman who acts purely on impulse rather than logic. Noel then comments that he heard the old Gambino boss was a man of honor, and can't understand how someone like that would hand his legacy to Albert. Loki explains it might be because Albert was his only son, though he was actually a bastard from a previous relationship only brought into the family when he came of age. Suddenly, Noel hears the heavy steps of someone armed approaching, so he quickly realizes that Loki has sold him out. Loki looks at him regretfully and apologizes, so Noel tells him that betraying a client as an informant completely ruins his reputation as a pro, and Loki knows it. But he admits he values his life more than his works, saying he's got enough money to skip town and start fresh somewhere else. But Noel is unfazed and points out a hole in Loki's little plan, and then he calmly points his gun at him and says that there's no reason to leave him alive. Noel then adds that it's a shame because he didn't really hate Loki. Loki says that he feels the same, and he surprisingly accepts his fate with calm resolve. Noel curiously asks why he's suddenly so accepting of death when he was so desperate to avoid it moments ago. Loki answers that he just realized it wasn't Noel he betrayed tonight, it was his own pride as an informant. Impressed by this change, Noel lowers his gun and decides to spare him. He then tells Loki that he doesn't have to leave the capital, declaring that he's going to take down the entire Gambino family himself, and adds that Loki can stay here and rebuild his pride right in the city. Loki is visibly relieved with tears streaming down his cheeks as Noel calmly tells him to go. Loki obeys, and once alone, Noel drinks a battle potion, explaining that it boosts his combat powers for a solid 10 minutes, but the backlash afterward is a real killer. Just then, the assassin arrives, and to Noel's surprise, it's Kuba. Noel notes that Kuba's clearly moved up in the world, and Kuba gruffly replies that it's none of Noel's business. Noel shrugs and suggests they get started, remarking that at least this time they won't be interrupted. But Kuba admits he'd rather not fight Noel and even recalls that he still owes him a silver coin, so Noel smirks and wonders if that means he'll just let him go, but Kuba shakes his head and says that he can't disobey his master. Fatigued in the field, Kuba formally introduces himself, revealing his C rank and special skill is slicing. Noel quickly realizes that Kuba's trying to keep things fair by sharing his ability, but Noel doesn't need his sympathy, so he returns the favor by announcing his own trick is using skills with 0 MP costs. He then fires a few bullets, but Kuba evades with ease and counters, forcing Noel to dodge as well. Noel switches tactics and fires a blazing shot, figuring Kuba as a physical frontline type likely doesn't have fire resistance. But Kuba slices right through the flames, leaving Noel stunned. He realizes that Kuba must have cut the air itself, creating a vacuum and depriving the fire of oxygen so it couldn't burn. The two then clash in a rapid exchange of blows, and at one point Noel goes for a low blow, aiming for his family's jewelry, but Kuba dodges and scolds him for fighting dirty. Noel snaps back that in a life-or-death fight, there are no rules. He then deploys a flashbang blinding Kuba temporarily, but Kuba fends him off by sending precise slashes in every direction. Observing Kuba's precision despite being unable to see, Noel realizes that Kuba must have set an attack in the air earlier, ready to unleash it whenever needed, and that must be his slicing ability at work. Kuba then attacks with his eyes shut, so Noel tries to stun him with his stun howl, but Kuba shrugs it off like it's nothing. The failed attempt sends Noel stumbling backward, and he loses his balance, tumbling off the building's edge in shock that his howl skill didn't affect him. Once Noel regains consciousness at the base of the building, Kuba stands over him with his sword drawn, declaring his victory. He admits Noel was his best opponent yet, but Noel demands to know why Kuba isn't finishing the job and reminds him of the Gambino's orders to end his life. Noel then angrily grabs the blade, accusing Kuba of going soft, and he warns that pity has no place here, and Albert Gambino won't spare Kuba if he fails his mission. Kuba wavers, unsure if he can go through with it, but Noel argues that there's nothing more precious than life itself, so Kuba skeptically wonders if Noel is trying to sacrifice himself to let him live. But before he can decide, needles streak through the air. Kuka narrowly dodges and Alma emerges. Noel is relieved to see her, but he collapses because the potion's effects wearing off, and he recalls summoning Alma through Link while drinking it. Alma then coldly asks Noel if she can kill Kuba, and he gives her permission. Alma lunges at Kuba, who parries her attack and claims that he doesn't want to harm a woman, but Alma scoffs, asserting she's stronger than him. Their blades then clash furiously while Kuba taunts her, saying she only caught him off guard earlier and even then couldn't finish him. Smirking at his arrogance, Alma retorts that she won't let him die so easily, so she activates her quintuple excel, shocking Kuba with her speed, but he still manages to block her attacks. Realizing the need to focus, Kuba shuts his eyes to activate Calm Sense, a skill that heightens his senses. Alma then attacks relentlessly at high speed, but Kuba counters each move with precision. Noel then recalls that Calm Sense is a skill that sharpens the user's senses when they close their eyes, so it dawns on him why blinding Kuba had failed earlier. He reflects bitterly on the fact that there will always be someone stronger than him, and as a talker, there are heights he simply cannot reach, but he shakes off the self-pity because there's no time for that, and if he can't reach the top on his own, there's only one path forward: conquer the strongest to become the strongest. Meanwhile, Alma shifts her strategy and activates her deadly blood poison skill, fully intent on killing Kuga. Seeing her resolve, Kuga discards his hesitation and decides that he can no longer think of her as just a woman and prepares to activate his insta-kill skill. But before the situation spirals further, Noel fires a flash bullet into the sky, commanding Alma to retreat. She protests, clearly not liking the idea, but Noel snaps that this is an order. He also tells Kuba to leave, warning that he's called the military police. Noel adds that Albert Gambino will be enraged if Kuba fails his mission and gets arrested. Realizing Noel has a point, Kuga reluctantly agrees and begins to leave. But before he goes, Noel stops in with a message for Albert, so Kuba listens carefully. The scene then shifts to Albert at his mansion, handing Kuba a gift box, and when Kuba opens it, he finds Miguel's severed head staring back at him. Albert coldly explains that Miguel had to pay for his failure and warns Kuba that this is his last chance because there's no one left to take the fall for him now, and Kuba promises to carry out his orders perfectly next time. As he's about to leave the room, he pauses to deliver a message from Noel. Noel's message is scathing. His motto is to make people pay 1,000 times over, and he vows to personally crush the Gambino family. He even challenges Albert to come after him directly if he can't handle the insult. Albert, visibly enraged, questions whether Noel really said this or if Kuba is fabricating it, comparing him to the lying chief of Mint's village. Kuba affirms the message, and Albert, laughing maniacally, declares that he'll kill Noel himself, and then he orders Leos to gather the soldiers immediately. As Leos and Kuga exit the room, Leos remarks that Kuga might have gone too far. Kuga apologizes, but Leos probes deeper, wondering if Kuga is upset about Miguel's death. Kuga dismisses the idea, calling Miguel a trashy master, and instead he admits that he finds Noel amazing and adds that despite being a talker, the weakest class in existence, Noel managed to stand toe-to-toe with him. Kuga then reflects on how Noel must have pushed himself to the brink to achieve that strength, though he still doubts a talker can beat a combat type like him. Yet what struck him most were Noel's eyes, because it's burning with a kind of conviction that made it seem like no one could ever defeat him. Leos then teases him by accusing Kuba of falling for Noel, but Kuba gets embarrassed and quickly denies any romantic interest. But Leos laughs it off, explaining that admiration between men is normal because it's about respecting someone's skill to the point of feeling compelled to chase after them. Leos then turns to leave, saying Kuba will understand it one day, but Kuba then curiously asks if Leos has ever felt that way. So Leos pauses and recalls a memory and admits with a nostalgic tone that it happened to him a long time ago. The next day, Albert struts into the tavern where the Seekers gather looking for Noel. The moment he spots him, Albert sizes him up, thinking Noel resembles a woman trying to mock him. Taking a swig of the drink on the table, Albert grimaces and declares it disgusting, sneering that this is exactly the kind of garbage he'd expect from poor Seekers. Noel unbotheredly fires back with a sharp roast, calling out Albert's lack of manners and branding him a disgrace to the Gambino name. Then with a smirk, Noel feigns an apology, recalling aloud that Albert only joined the family as an adult, and he slyly adds that the boss who raised him must have been terrible at training his dogs. Albert loses his composure, yelling in Noel's face, but Noel shuts him down with a jab about his smelly breath, telling him to back off. Albert then furiously threatens to tear Noel's cheeky mouth open and vows to make sure he'll never enjoy food again. Noel fires back with a smirk that Albert only has the guts to bark because his goons are present. Albert then loses control and lunges at Noel, but Logan steps in and stops him cold. Logan reminds Albert that violence is strictly banned here, no matter what his problem with Noel is, and he firmly explains that this bar is a haven for seekers and outsiders don't get to throw their weight around. Albert irritantly tries to pull rank and asks Logan if he has any idea who he's dealing with. Logan calmly replies that he does, but emphasizes that seekers guard their pride and Albert won't get special treatment here. Albert then angrily orders his goons to slaughter everyone present, prompting Leos to casually point out that sure they could pull that off, but he wonders what Albert planning to tell Papa Luciano if he does that. Leaning in, Leos reminds him in a low voice that Papa Luciano is already watching him like a hawk because of the drug mess, so if he goes ahead and publicly wipes out seekers on top of that, the whole country won't just look the other way and it'll be game over for all of us. And he coolly adds that if Albert's dead set on this, he can still give the order again. Albert hesitates, clearly rattled, and Noel silently labels him a coward for quaking at the thought of Papa Luciano or the nation's wrath, and he scoffs that Albert's got no business running an organization if he's this spineless. Albert's temper flares, but before he can erupt, Noel warns him that if he doesn't calm down, the poisoned wine he just drank will do the job for him. Albert freezes in shock, accusing Noel of bluffing since there's no way Noel could have known he'd drink that particular wine. So Noel calmly says that he didn't know, but if Albert drank it, he would gain something, and if he didn't, there was nothing to lose. Albert then desperately tries to vomit the wine, but Noel coolly informs him that it's pointless because the poison is already in his system, and he's as good as dead. So Albert panickedly bolts out of the tavern, frantically searching for a doctor. Back inside, Leo smirks and commends Noel on his bluffing skills, and then he takes a sip of the same wine and declares it excellent, proving that the poison was a complete fabrication. He remarks that Kuva's assessment of Noel was spot on and pays him for the wine, adding with a calm but firm tone that he will let this incident slide, but Noel must leave the capital immediately. When Noel asks what would happen if he refused, Leos replies with icy certainty that he'd have no choice but to kill him, so Noel agrees to leave and exits the tavern. Later, Noel and Alma are seen leaving the capital. Alma marvels at how everything played out exactly as Noel predicted, but Noel cautions her that it's far too early to start celebrating because the real battle is just beginning. Alma agrees, saying they'll return in a week, but in the meantime, she plans to train in the mountains. Noel also mentions having something he needs to investigate, and the two part ways with a promise to reunite after a week. Fast forward a week, Noel and Alma are back squaring off against Albert and his gang. Albert, dumbfounded, can't believe Noel dared to return so soon. Noel mocks him with a sharp retort, telling him to stop barking and show what he's made of, so Albert furiously orders his lackeys to tear Noel's limbs, vowing to make his death slow and excruciating. But to his shock, his men don't budge, so Albert confusedly demands an explanation, but they remain silent. That's when Noel informs Albert that his foolish actions have stripped him of the right to lead. The story then rewinds a few days, dropping us into a scene where Albert's lackeys are griping about their miserable situation. They're fed up, saying they can't keep following their lunatic boss's twisted orders. Recently, Albert had commanded them to massacre the chief of Mint's village and his entire family in a heinously cruel fashion, a task that even made these hardened criminals wince. They can't stomach what happened to the little girl, admitting they joined this underworld because they admired the chivalry of the previous boss, not to prey on the defenseless. So they frustratedly turned to Leos, asking if he could intervene. But before he could respond, Noel stepped in, urging them to stop bickering among themselves. Then his eyes landed on a bamboo dragonfly they held, and his anger boiled because this was proof that the little girl was dead. Leos then reminds Noel that he was supposed to have left the capital, so Noel with a smirk shot back that he did leave, but just for a week, and called it a nice little vacation. Leos wasn't amused and demanded to know if Noel understood what he was doing, so Noel calmly confirmed he did and handed Leos a piece of paper, leaving him visibly shocked. The narrative then takes us further back, revealing the story behind that paper. It was Albert's birth certificate, which Noel had obtained from Loki. Loki spilled that Albert's mother was married to another man, meaning Albert's claim of being the previous boss's illegitimate son was a total lie. Sure, his mother had an affair with the old boss, but the certificate made it clear Albert was born well after her marriage, and that proved he wasn't the boss's son. When Noel asked if the old boss had known this, Loki speculated he likely did, but still went along with the charade out of loyalty or lingering feelings for his past lover. Noel then absorbed the information and told Loki they were square now, referencing the time Loki had tried to kill him. But before parting ways, Noel gave Loki a new task: investigate the old boss's death and track down the doctor who attended his final moments. Loki caught on quickly, realizing Noel suspected foul play, so Noel coolly remarked that if his hunch was correct, he'd have everything he needed to destroy Albert. Back in the present, Leos confronts Albert with two pressing questions. First, he bluntly asks if Albert is truly the son of the former boss, shoving a birth certificate in his face. Albert's face freezes in shock, but Leos doesn't stop there and asks if he poisoned the former boss to death and disguises it as a natural illness. Albert tries to deny it, claiming there's no proof. But Noel steps in, cutting him off with a sharp retort, saying proof isn't necessary when the doctor who witnessed everything has already spilled the beans. Noel reveals that the doctor confessed Albert had bribed him to stay quiet about the suspicious symptoms that pointed to poisoning. Albert is cornered and tries to call Noel a liar, but Noel smirks and says that talkers like him have a skill called confess that forces people to admit their crimes, and he calmly explains that he used it on the doctor, and the truth came pouring out. Albert is now visibly cornered, so Leos makes it clear that they won't follow him anymore, saying he's lost both their respect and any claim to leadership. Albert tries to justify himself, saying the former boss willingly passed on the position to him. But Laios scoffs, reminding him that it was only after he killed the boss in cold blood. But despite everything, Laios offers Albert one final chance out of respect for the former boss, a one-on-one duel with Noel, and if Albert wins, he'll be recognized as the boss. Albert, however, knows his odds are slim, so Laios allows him to choose a stand-in to fight on his behalf, and he can choose anyone he wants from them. Albert snaps back, saying he doesn't have to listen to them. But just then, Finocchio storms in, silencing Albert with a sharp rebuke and declaring that he'll serve as the witness for the duel. Finocchio also adds that he's been waiting for an opportunity to get rid of Albert for some time now, so when Noel proposed this plan, he jumped at the chance. On top of that, if Noel wins, Finocchio will reward him with a staggering 50 million. Albert then furiously accuses Finocchio of masterminding the entire ordeal, but Finocchio denies it outright and snaps back, saying he's fed up with Albert's constant whining and shouts at Albert to stop wasting time and pick someone to fight for him, unless Albert wants to face far worse consequences at Finocchio's hands, so Albert reluctantly agrees to choose a proxy. Finocchio then lays it out. If Albert's chosen fighter wins, he will once again be recognized as the boss of the Gambino family. And as an added bonus, Finocchio promises to overlook the mess Albert caused at the secret tavern, but he warns Albert to make his decision quickly. Albert then scans the room for a moment before ultimately selecting Kuba to fight on his behalf. Noel, however, had already anticipated this move because, after all, while Kuga might not be the strongest here, he's bound by an oath of subordination, leaving him no choice but to obey Albert, even if he won otherwise. Alma then sees this as a chance for a rematch to prove she's stronger than Kuba, but Noel pushes her aside, insisting that he'll handle it himself. Alma tries to dissuade him, certain that Noel can't win against Kuba, but Noel remains confident and tells her to sit back and watch him in action. Then when Noel steps up to face Kuba, he quickly notices Kuba's excitement, and despite having nothing to gain, Kuba seems thrilled at the opportunity to fight him again, because to Kuba, this is a golden opportunity. Kuga then assumes that Noel must have a plan up his sleeve if he's this determined to fight personally, and he's eager to find out exactly what Noel has in store. The two opponents then rave themselves before charging at each other, but Noel leaps into the air and fires an ice bullet. Kuga manages to deflect it, but the impact creates a towering ice wall that surrounds them, blocking the view of the fight from everyone outside. As the battle unfolds, Noel keeps darting around to avoid Kuba's relentless slashes, and when he finally creates some distance, Kuba shifts into a stance, signaling his live flash. This technique amplifies Kuba's attack power sevenfold once he draws his sword, meaning that if Noel gets too close, he risks being cleaved in two. Yet Noel remains unfazed because he's already set the stage for victory. To Kuga's astonishment, Noel tosses his gun aside, claiming it's out of ammo. Instead, he pulls out a dagger, declaring it will finish the fight. But before engaging, Noel blurts out something seemingly nonsensical. He says orange peels can be used to scrub out stubborn grease stains. Kuba, thrown off by the nonsensical comment, demands to know what Noel is talking about. But Noel was counting on this distraction, using it to exploit an opening in Kuba's defenses. Now Kuba hesitates, wary of a potential hidden trick, and that hesitation is all Noel needs. Kuba eventually strikes, slashing at Noel's arm, but it's all part of Noel's plan. Noel lets Kuba's sword strike him, trapping the blade in his arm just long enough for him to wrench it away. Shocked by Noel's audacity, Kuga snarls in disbelief. But disarming Kuga isn't enough to end the fight because Kuga pushes Noel back with sheer force and lunges to retrieve his weapon before it hits the ground. And in one fluid motion, he unleashes a devastating slash that shatters the ice dome around them, sending Noel flying. But Noel isn't down yet. As he tumbles, Kuga sees an opportunity and charges forward to deliver the killing blow. What he doesn't realize is that his strike lands not on Noel, but on an ice bullet Noel had hidden in his pocket. The bullet's freezing effects spread instantly, immobilizing Kuga in a sheath of solid ice. Every move Noel made in the fight had been calculated to bait Kuga into this moment of carelessness. With Kuga frozen in place, Noel seizes the chance to finish things, so he leaps into the air and delivers a powerful kick, knocking Kuga out cold. Flashback time, we see that since childhood, Kuga had never been able to stand up for himself. With no one to care for him, he was left powerless, unable to fight back against anyone or anything. But his life took a grim turn when he became a gladiator, forced to battle for his survival. He despised every moment of it, yet those death matches forged him into someone stronger. However, no matter how much strength he gained, deep down he remained that same timid kid who couldn't defend himself, so all he could ever do was follow orders. Back in the present, the fight is over and Noel is declared the victor. Kuga lies on the ground defeated, and silently wishing he could be as strong as Noel, because despite being a talker, Noel has never let anyone trample on his freedom or ideals. Kuga knows he won't be getting up anytime soon, but with the winner of the match already decided, Albert officially loses all of his rights to call himself the leader of the Gambino family. Noel, having finished his mission, calls out to Finocchio, telling him he's done here, and whatever happens to Albert now is entirely up to them. But before Noel leaves, Leo steps forward to compliment his incredible fighting skills and thanks him for finally dealing with Albert. Laios adds that if Noel ever needs help, he'd be more than happy to lend a hand. But Noel turns him down, firmly stating that he wants no further association with the Gambino family. Later, Noel and Alma retreat to a nearby building where Alma begins tending to his wounds. As she patches him up, she scolds Noel for being reckless during the fight. That final kick to Kuga's chest, she points out, was unnecessarily risky because if Kuga had anticipated it, Noel could have easily lost. Noel shrugs it off, reassuring her that everything worked out in the end and that there's no need to worry. But Alma refuses to let it slide, reminding him that fighting is her job, and as the commander, Noel shouldn't put himself in danger like that. Noel apologizes and promises to be more careful, so Alma gets satisfied and tells him that he can always rely on her when it comes to fighting because she'll always have his back. Just then, Finocchio strolls into the room, congratulating Noel on a job well done, but there's something on his mind he needs to discuss. Noel, quick to the point, asks if this is about the payment for defeating Albert, making it clear he won't entertain any discounts. But Finocchio chuckles and assures him there's no way he'd cheapen such a deal because after all, it was a win-win. He got rid of a useless rival without lifting a finger, and Noel earned every bit of that 50 million. However, he has something else to discuss, something private, so he turns to Alma and politely asks if she can step out for a moment. Noel nods at Alma, reassuring her it's fine, and she exits the room, and the second she's gone, Finocchio cuts to the chase. He proposes Noel join his Luciano's family, promising him respect, power, and perks. In fact, if Noel agrees, Finocchio is even ready to hand him leadership of the Gambino family. Noel can't help but smirk at the offer, finding it entertaining. But he points out an obvious fact: he's only 16 years old, so how could he possibly run an entire family? Finocchio waves off the concern, claiming age doesn't matter, and what matters is Noel's guts, and Noel has them in spades. Noel acknowledges the truth in that, but he doesn't hold back and reminds Finocchio that he's turned this offer down before, so by now Finocchio should know there's no chance Noel would ever serve under anyone. Finocchio once again asks Noel if he's absolutely certain about his answer, and Noel firmly affirms that he is. In response, Finocchio reveals that his class is an A-rank Punisher, granting him access to a particularly intriguing skill, and suddenly Noel senses that something is horribly amiss. Glancing upward, he freezes as he sees Finocchio holding his heart literally in the palm of his hand. So Noel panically checks himself, and just as he feared, there is no heartbeat in his chest. Then with an unsettling calmness, Finocchio begins to explain. His judgment skill allows him to forcibly remove the heart of any target who refuses a request from him twice. But Noel's heart has been ripped from his body. He remains alive because the organ is still spatially linked to him. However, Finocchio warns that if he moves more than 5 meters away or crushes the heart, Noel's life will end. Finocchio admits he sees Noel as too dangerous to let roam freely because Noel's talent poses a growing threat to the Finocchio family, so it will be better to deal with this problem now. Noel then unfazedly asks if Finocchio plans to kill him to snuff out the potential threat. Finocchio confirms as much but offers Noel one final chance to join the Luciano family. Noel laughs, defiant as ever, and flatly refuses. Rising to his feet, he faces Finocchio, who warns him that fighting back is useless because the heart will not return unless Finocchio dispels the skill. Yet Noel steps closer undeterred and boldly declares his ambition. He will become the greatest seeker who ever lived, so powerful that even the Luciano family won't dare challenge him. Finocchio sneers, affirming that killing Noel now is the wisest course of action, but Noel then leans in, taunting him, daring him to follow through. But he also reminds Finocchio that the moment he acts, he'll prove himself a coward, because he was so terrified of Noel's future strength that he had to eliminate him while he was still weak. And he also adds that whether Finocchio kills him or not, Noel vows that he will bow to no one. In that charged moment, even though Finocchio is the one holding Noel's heart, Noel has firmly gripped Finocchio's heart with fear. Finocchio then backtracks with a sly grin, claiming he was just kidding about killing him, and with a dramatic flourish, he returns Noel's heart to his chest, apologizing for the misunderstanding. But as he turns to leave, he pauses at the door, throwing a sharp reminder over his shoulder. Noel can't take back what he said, so he better climb to the top of the secret world for real. Then as Finocchio exits, his gaze locks with Alma's. Her eyes practically scream murder, her fury barely contained after the cruel little stunt he pulled. But she doesn't act on it, so he simply smirks and strides out to his carriage, where Albert is being held. And the moment Albert spots him, he begins frantically begging for his life, tears spilling as he pleads not to be killed. Finocchio, thoroughly unimpressed, finds Albert's pitiful display annoying, but then an idea strikes, one as twisted as his grin. And with a sinister smile, Finocchio tells Albert he won't kill him. Instead, he'll cut off his limbs and toss him into the pig bin to fit in with the pigs, but then he warns him that his pigs are so cute that they will eat anything. So Albert had better stay on their good side and play nice. And while Albert is shiting himself, Finocchio starts grinning like a lunatic and adds with giddy excitement that he hopes his cells will love their new companion. And that shit makes it leaves no doubt that Albert's life has taken a terrifying turn when he fell in Finocchio's lap. The next day, Noel meets with Kuga and presents him with a contract of subordination, proof that Kuga is now bound to him as a slave. Kuga then assumes this means Noel wants to be his master, but Noel brushes off the idea because he has no use for a slave like Kuga. Sure, Kuga has some decent power, but compared to the other seekers in this world, he's little more than a weakling. Noel then makes it clear that his ambition is to rise to the top of the seeker world, and for that he needs a fierce wolf, not a whimpering pup. Noel then hands Kuga the contract and tells him he's a free man now, and he can do whatever he wants. Then with his newfound freedom, Noel asks Kuga what he wants to do next. Kuga has spent his entire life being used by others, so when he is given the chance to be free, he finds himself at a loss. Freedom is an unfamiliar concept, but there's one thing he knows for sure. He wants to stay by Noel's side and witness his dream become reality. If Noel needs a fierce wolf, then that's exactly what Kuga will become. So with determination in his voice, he asks Noel to let him join Blue Beyond, and Noel gladly welcomes him to the team. Not long after, the party embarks on their first mission together, and their synergy is nearly flawless. Noel directs the team with precision, providing support and strategy. Kuga slices through enemy forces with deadly efficiency, while Alma clears the way for him to unleash his full power. They work together like a pro team until Koba tries to finish off the monster general, only for Alma to swoop in and steal the kill, and that sparks an argument between the two. Noel steps in and shuts them down by reminding them that they're a team and petty squabbles like this mess up their coordination. He then warns Alma to stop showing off on the battlefield, as it disrupts their coordination, and reminds Kuga that there are no kill counts to keep, so he shouldn't get so worked up about it. Despite the brief clash, the mission is a resounding success for their first quest as a trio. So Noel then announces that once they return to Yttria, he'll apply for Blue Beyond to officially become a clan. And as a registered clan, they'll gain state recognition, allowing them to take on quests directly without intermediaries or commission fees, so it's a major milestone for their journey. Then as Noel lays out their plans, Kuga notices something on Noel's arm and points it out. To his surprise, Noel realizes it's the mark signifying his eligibility to rank up to B rank. This is fantastic news since alongside his new team, this advancement brings Noel one step closer to his ultimate goal, which is to become the strongest of the 7 stars in Regalia. The story then flashes back to the past, where Noel is seen calmly directing his maids on how to manage business operations more efficiently. Just then, an elderly man enters the room, introducing himself as Harold Jenkins, the guild's supervisor. Noel offers him a glass of wine, which Harold samples with approval, remarking that the winery must be thriving. Noel responds modestly, saying it's doing well enough, and that he's getting by thanks to his grandfather's inheritance and the loyal servants left behind. Harold observes that Noel seems to have a natural talent for leadership, but Noel downplays the compliment, admitting he doesn't do much of significance and plans to hand over the business to his staff soon. Then his tone shifts as he pointedly asks Harold what he wants, noting that he's already shared everything he knows about the tragedy that devastated his town. Harold then reveals a photograph of an abyssal beast, identifying it as the same lord that appeared in Noel's town. Noel remains unsurprised because he had long suspected the creature's survival. After his grandfather's death, 2 things had gone missing: the lord's body and his grandfather's battle axe. Noel inquires if the beast has been dealt with, but Harold explains that a clan called Night Rage attempted to defeat it and failed. And by the time the Supreme Dragon clan pursued it, the lord had already retreated into the void. Noel is taken aback, and Harold elaborates, explaining that while abyssal beasts typically act on raw, uncontrollable instinct, this one appears to have manifested with deliberate intent. Harold further reveals that this is the same lord who defeated Over Death, speculating that its recent appearances have made it powerful enough to evolve into a new variant. Realization dawns on Noel because it could now rival the 10 Dark Lords of Abyssal Depth 13, each capable of destroying their world entirely. Harold then reveals that the last time a variant appeared was 40 years ago, and it was Cocytus the Silverfish, a beast that annihilated 3 nations in the blink of an eye before being defeated by Overdeath's clan, the Bloodsword Federation. Harold explains that it marked the first time a variant had ever been defeated, and prior to this, humanity believed the only solution was to send these beasts back into the abyss. Noel realizes that this beast might bring about a similar catastrophe for humanity, so he smiles with intrigue. Observing this, Harold notes that Noel is strikingly similar to his grandfather. He then shares that he once served as an inspector for the Bloodsword Federation and knew Noel's grandfather well. His visit was initially to check in on Noel, but now he feels reassured, and then he remarks that Noel will turn 15 next year and will finally be able to start his journey as a Seeker. Then as Harold moves to leave, Noel stops him and boldly declares to remember his face because he's determined to become the strongest Seeker one day. Back in the present, we find the members of Blue Beyond in a room, waiting nervously for an inspector to review their clan application. Noel then advises Kuba to answer the inspector's questions normally, but Kuba frets and wonders what would happen if his answers upset the inspector. Noel reassures him that it won't matter, but Alma raises the stakes by teasing that their application could be rejected if Kuba slips up. And this only makes Kuba more anxious as he frets over ruining Noel's dream, while Alma darkly jokes that if he fails, he should just die, adding that it would leave her alone with Noel, which she openly hopes for. Noel tries to calm them down when they suddenly sense a sinister presence. They tense up, only to realize it's Harold entering the room. Harold tells them to relax and begins reviewing their application. He notes their preparation, impressed that they've secured both a clan house and the steep 20 million fee, showing they've done their research. Noel confidently informs Harold that both he and Alma will rank up as soon as the clan is formed. Harold also observes that their clan's name differs from their party's current name, prompting Noel to explain that he plans to change the party name once the clan is official. But despite their preparations, Harold rejects the application. Meanwhile, we see the Vice Clan Master of Supreme Dragon, a one-star Regalia clan, standing victorious after single-handedly defeating a Depth 12 Abyssal Beast. And his name is Zeke Feinstein, the Innocent Blade. Back in the room, Harold explains that they are currently prioritizing stronger Seekers, and that Blue Beyond doesn't meet the qualifications to match his standard. So when Noel asks why the requirements have changed, Harold reveals the discovery of a massive mana presence on the western border. The underground mana flow there is reaching critical levels, and it's only a matter of time before it erupts. He then estimates that they have about a year to prepare. When this time comes, a massive abyss will form, and at depth 13 a Lord Variant is expected to emerge. Kuva nervously suggests stopping it before it happens, but Harold dismisses the idea, explaining that interfering with the mana flow would only trigger even worse disasters. Alma then wonders aloud if the Variant could be defeated, prompting Harold to recall the victory over Cocytus. He explains that while Cocytus was defeated and the Empire now thrives as a result, such a battle would require a major coalition of top Seekers and Regalia. But despite acknowledging their strengths, Harold admits that after witnessing a Variant firsthand, even he isn't confident victory is possible. He then cautions them to keep this information to themselves and once again rejects their application, stating they lack the resources to train rookies. As Harold finishes, Noel abruptly leaves, his determination and demeanor eerily reminiscent of his grandfather Overdeath. The scene then cuts to the streets of the town, where Kuba asks Noel if he's giving up on forming a clan, but Noel dismisses the question as stupid because this situation is a unique opportunity for them to make a monumental leap forward. He then drags them into a secluded alley and reveals that while a Variant is capable of wiping out humanity, it is also a massive blessing in disguise. He then reminds them how Cocytus' defeat elevated the Empire's standard of living, revealing that Cocytus' heart is now used to purify water for the entire nation. Defeating advanced beasts often leads to breakthroughs in magic-engineered civilization, which is why Seekers are celebrated as heroes. Noel declares that their goal should be to become one of the Regalia as soon as possible. However, Kuba hesitates, pointing out that they aren't even an official clan yet. Alma then recalls that Noel had earlier mentioned they would join the Regalia in a year, but now he's moved up the timeline, announcing they'll do it in just 6 months. Noel explains that in the coming months, they'll gain enough experience to stand out as a clan, and ideally they'll be invited to face a Variant within a year. And if they manage to defeat it, their names will be etched in history as some of the strongest Seekers, so this urgency leaves no room for wasting time. Noel then emphasizes they must hone their skills and knowledge before becoming a clan, ensuring they're prepared to join the Regalia. Meanwhile, he hears a newspaper vendor shouting about Zeke defeating a Depth 12 Lord. Noel contemplates that what they really need is a dramatic event, something that grabs public attention and tells a story people won't forget, so he assures his team he'll devise a plan. Shortly after, Noel is seen ranking up and selecting the subclass of Strategist. A gnome assists him through the process, and once completed, Noel explains that the Strategist class enhances cognitive abilities, allowing real-time battle analysis and immediate calculated orders based on predictions. Later, as Noel strolls through town, he spots Zeke surrounded by women eager to dine with him. Zeke notices Noel and makes his way over, surprising Noel by recognizing him immediately. Playing the role of a polite gentleman, Noel greets Zeke warmly. Noel then enlightens us that there are currently 3 EX rank Seekers in the city. Victor Krauser, the beginning one and master of Supreme Dragon, Leo Eden, the King Slayer and master of Pandemonium, and finally Zeke Feinstein, known as Innocent Blade. Zeke then recalls that Noel is Overdeck's grandson and notes Noel's recent role in overthrowing the Gambinos. But while Noel tries to dismiss the claim, Zeke remains certain, and he points out that the Gambino incident unfolded shortly after Noel's clash with their boss, leaving him curious about the methods Noel employed. Noel then abruptly drops the facade, confronting Zeke and asking why he's trying to recruit him in such a roundabout way, so Zeke admits openly that he wants Noel to join his clan. Unsurprisingly, Noel refuses, declaring he has no interest in working under someone else. But Zeke undeterredly tells Noel that he's the kind of person willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. Sensing Zeke's tenacity and potential for aggression, Noel challenges him directly, asking him to prove his strength. He declares that he can only serve someone he recognizes as the strongest. Noel then points out that the city currently hosts 3 EX-ranked Seekers, and with Victor aging, that leaves just 2 contenders for the top spot, Zeke and Leo. He then goads Zeke by wondering aloud who is the stronger of the 2, making it clear he expects Zeke to prove himself superior to Leo if he wants Noel on his side. Zeke, realizing an all-out fight with Leo would likely end in one of their deaths, accuses Noel of being utterly incorrigible. After parting ways, some passersby spot Zeke, and one of them casually remarks that Zeke is the 2nd strongest Seeker in the city. The comment enrages Zeke, who demands an explanation, so the man nervously explains that Leo has defeated more Lords solo than Zeke, so Zeke infuriatedly sends the man flying. Noel, overhearing the exchange, picks up on Zeke's insecurity about being called second best and decides he needs to form his clan quickly before Zeke's temper lands him in deeper trouble. Meanwhile, Alma is seen training with Licia, who easily defeats her. Licia points out Alma's shortcomings as a backliner, explaining that Alma gets too heated in battle and fails to keep track of her surroundings, as demonstrated by her earlier misstep into Licia's attack range. Licia emphasizes that a backliner's role is to maintain control of the battlefield and monitor everything happening, something Noel excels at. Alma begins to consider switching to an assassin role, and Licia agrees it might suit her better. However, Licia assures Alma that while party balance is important, Noel is resourceful enough to make effective use of her, regardless of her choice. Another elf named Ophelia arrives, her face lighting up when she sees Licia. The two embrace warmly, clearly overjoyed to reunite after a long time apart. Spotting Alma nearby, Ophelia curiously asks if she's a new recruit. Licia smiles and explains that Alma is actually her best friend and that she's been helping her navigate the ropes of being a Seeker since Alma recently joined. Licia then introduces Ophelia, sharing that she's from the Winged Knights party and that the 2 of them hail from the same village. As they chat, the rest of Ophelia's party joins them, so Licia introduces each member: Vaclav, the Summoner, Keen the Lancer, and their leader Leon Frederick. Ophelia warmly offers Alma her support, telling her to reach out if she ever needs help. Alma thanks her, but Ophelia elaborates, saying Seekers should watch each other's backs, especially with troublemakers throwing their weight around lately. Her tone shifts as she explains she's referring to Noel, the leader of a party called Blue Beyond. She then warns Alma to be cautious, revealing that Noel has a reputation for selling his own party members as slaves and making shady deals with the mob, and she emphasizes that every bit of news about him reeks of trouble. Ophelia even mentions hearing that Noel recently recruited new members, though she assumes they're cut from the same cloth as him. Alma listens with quiet amusement as Ophelia continues, but Leon steps in, gently admonishing her not to judge people she's never met. Realizing she's gone too far, Ophelia apologizes and the group departs soon after. Licia then turns to Alma and apologizes for the drama, but Alma shrugs it off and admits that most of what Ophelia said was probably true. Later, we see Noel meeting up with Loki, because Noel has tasked Loki with compiling a list of all the B-rank parties in the area. Scanning the list, Noel's attention is drawn to one party that stands out. Loki recognizes them too, describing them as a humble and reliable group that has surprisingly not yet formed a clan. We then find out that they are talking about Leon's party, the Winged Knights, and Loki adds that their leader isn't just strong, but also famously good-looking and possibly the strongest B-rank Seeker around. Turning to Noel, Loki congratulates him for reaching B-rank as well, though Noel dismisses the praise, calling it meaningless. Noel then starts eyeing Leon's party as an opportunity and declares his intent to exploit Leon's weaknesses to climb higher, because he's confident that even the strongest have dirty secrets, and once they are exposed, they can be used to bring them down. Loki then notices the sinister gleam in Noel's eyes and remarks on his nasty expression. But then Noel responds with chilling conviction, stating that he's prepared to do whatever it takes to claw his way to the top. The scene then shifts to prisoner Hugo Capilia stepping out to meet a visitor, who turns out to be none other than Noel. But Hugo, with a weary expression, acts as if he's fed up with these meetings, making it clear that Noel has been visiting him repeatedly. Noel, on the other hand, notices Hugo's thinner frame and comments that he looks like he's starving to death. Hugo brushes it off, claiming it's none of Noel's business, but Noel insists that he doesn't want him dying just yet because he's got plans to recruit him into his party once Hugo's free. Noel then dives into the heart of the matter, explaining that Hugo is a puppeteer awaiting sentencing for a murder that shook the entire capital to its core. He goes on to reveal that this man wasn't just anybody. He was a renowned seeker, a legend in his field. Noel elaborates that puppeteers are a rare and fascinating class, adept at both combat and production. With their ability to control a variety of puppets, they're versatile fighters in almost any situation, and with his icy demeanor and razor-sharp intellect, he had carved out a name for himself as a freelance seeker. But his lone wolf nature meant he never joined a party, and at the peak of his career, he abruptly retired to pursue life as a dollmaker. And he was wildly successful in that too, until the murder charge sent his life into a downward spiral. Hugo then tells Noel that he's wasting his time because there's no way to save him from execution. But Noel counters confidently, claiming there are plenty of ways, and to prove it, he casually orders a guard to fetch him tea. Hugo then watches as the guard obeys without hesitation and wonders if Noel bribed him, but Noel reveals that he's simply exploiting the little guard's weaknesses, so Hugo realizes that Noel is blackmailing the poor guard. Refusing to share the specifics, Noel smugly declares that every guard in the prison is under his thumb, and he informs Hugo that he's already laying the groundwork to secure his release. Hugo doesn't share the enthusiasm, but he admits that while the idea of freedom does appeal to him, the thought of being a seeker again doesn't. In fact, he despises seekers, calling them violent idiots who overhype their fighting skills. Noel, though, is even worse in his eyes because he is cunning, ruthless, and someone who probably manipulates people only to consume them whole like a snake. Noel unbotheredly takes it as a compliment. In fact, it inspires him to come up with a name for his plan. Then as Noel departs, he promises Hugo that he'll make sure he joins his team, while Hugo can't help but laugh at the absurd image of himself as a seeker again. The scene then shifts to Noel and his crew lounging at a different tavern today, this one called the Rockhard Beak. Kuga mentions that this place is strictly for B-rank seekers and above, but Noel being Noel, waltzes right in without a care in the world. As he enters, he's greeted, or rather misjudged, by a gruff seeker who mistakes him for a girl. Noel quickly clears up the misunderstanding, but the seeker is clearly not impressed and mocks him by saying that real men should have battle scars. So Noel undeterredly remarks that maybe the seeker's scars are just his way of proving he's not a girl, and that shit angers the man. Then Noel calmly asks him by his name if he wants to fight. But Edgar scoffs and declares that he's not going to be intimidated by Noel just because he's heard of him. But Noel counters that he doesn't just know him, he knows far more than Edgar realizes, and with a sly grin he reveals that he knows Edgar is about to become a father and is considering naming the baby Bruno if it's a boy or Cachua if it's a girl. Noel then congratulates him and adds a warning that if Edgar really wants to fight, he better be prepared to risk everything he holds dear. And the weight of the warning is enough to make Edgar back down. Noel then strides further into the tavern like a mafia boss, making his entrance, loudly announcing his name and his crew as if he owns the place. Once settled, Noel and his team start enjoying the food and drinks, thinking this place is far better than their last stop. But Noel reminds them to stay focused. They aren't here to relax. And right on time, their targets, the winged knights, enter the tavern. Then Ophelia, one of the knights, is startled to see Alma in this tavern. Noel, sensing an opportunity, telepathically asks Alma if she knows her, and Alma confirms that she does and makes it clear that Ophelia dislikes him. So Noel sees this tension as the perfect opening, declaring that they're going to fight. Ophelia, now paying attention to Alma's companions, asks who the two men beside her are, so Alma introduces them as Kuga and Noel. And the moment Ophelia hears Noel's name, her attitude shifts and accuses Noel of being the type who would sell his friends for money. But Noel retorts with a smirk, saying he simply got a good price for them. Ophelia gets angered and tries to grab him, but Kuga steps in, shielding Noel like a loyal knight, and declares Noel is his master and warns her that she'll have to deal with him first if she wants to lay a finger on him. Ophelia scoffs and calls Kuga a loyal dog wagging his tail for his master, but Kuga's not having it, and with a cold glare he tells her to choose her words carefully unless she's ready to make him draw his sword. Leon then comes over when he notices the tension and asks if something's wrong, so Noel calmly explains that Ophelia just tried to grab him. Ophelia then apologizes for her actions, and Leon offers Noel a sincere apology on her behalf. But Noel waves it off, suggesting Leon should train her better so such things don't happen again. And adds that even dogs can be trained not to attack people, then he jabs that Leon's party member seems even dumber than a dog. Liam doesn't take the insult lightly, his tone firm as he demands Noel take back his words. He acknowledges his party member's rudeness, but says that doesn't give Noel the right to insult her. Noel then realizes that Leon is trying to frame them as equally at fault, and it's a strategic move he finds smart. Ophelia then steps in, telling Leon there's no point in arguing with Noel, identifying him as the notorious figure everyone's been talking about, and she bluntly confirms the rumors they heard are all true. But Noel dismisses her as a typical gossip lover, wondering sarcastically what other girly habits she has, and with a smirk, he asks if she also likes playing with dolls or pretending to play house. Liam, clearly losing patience, snaps back saying Noel has no right to call himself a seeker if he can't even treat his party members with respect. But Noel remains unshaken, coldly stating that he doesn't need Leon's approval to be a seeker. And instead of backing down, he throws more insults, clearly enjoying how easily he can push their buttons. But before Leon's temper boils over, he storms out of the tavern. Kuba and Alma, who've been watching, comment on how savage Noel was, though they agree he might have gone too far. But Noel reassures them it was all part of his plan, and when he reveals the details, even they find it dirty. But Noel shrugs it off, reminding them of the harsh truth in the Seeker's world, and with an icy calm, he says it's eat or be eaten. And it's not the weak who get devoured, it's the ones who get too cocky. Elsewhere, Harold is seen talking with Marion, who asks who he thinks would be the best person to lead the battle against the Valiant. Harold turns the question back to her, and Marion confidently names Leo Eden. She clarifies that her choice isn't due to her role in Pandemonium, but because, despite his laziness and arrogance, no one is stronger than Leo. In fact, she claims he might be the strongest Seeker in history. Harold, however, doesn't seem to agree, so Marion guesses he's leaning toward Zeke, pointing out that while Zeke is strong, he lacks the qualities of a leader. But to her surprise, Harold suggests Noel as the leader, so she laughs at the idea, thinking it's a joke, until she realizes Harold is serious. She reminds him that he was the one who rejected Noel's application in the first place, so Harold proposes a wager to settle the matter. If Marion's choice becomes the commander, she'll be made head of the Jenkins family. But if she loses, she'll have to enroll in etiquette school, something Harold says she desperately needs as she lacks grace despite being a lady. He then teases her further, asking if she's too afraid to accept, and provoked by his taunt, Marion agrees to the bet, and Harold quietly hopes that Noel won't disappoint him. Meanwhile, Keem is seen strolling through the town at night when he encounters two drunk men, and the sight triggers an unexpected flashback. In the memory, a young Leon is shown being bullied by some kids after he reported them for shoplifting. True to his role as a knight of justice, Leon lectured them on how stealing was wrong. But the bullies mocked him, ignoring his words, and began picking on him. They only scattered when Keem appeared, scaring them off. Keem, seeing Leon's plight, advised him to learn how to fight so he wouldn't keep getting targeted. However, Leon rejects the idea, so Keem asks why, as he has a combat-tech job. But Leon says that he doesn't believe in responding to violence with violence. Keem was surprised by his pacifist stance and tried to dismiss it, but Leon's earnestness gave him pause. The two sat down to talk, and Keem floated the idea of becoming Seekers together because he believed they had the potential to be the best Seekers ever. Leon, however, expressed doubt, saying he wasn't as strong as Keem, but Keem reassured him, pointing out that Leon had the swordsman class, and also they both have what it takes to be a Seeker. But even then, Leon hesitated, unsure about the path, so to convince him, Keem appealed to his sense of justice, saying they can use their roles as Seekers to protect people by eliminating dangerous beasts. This argument struck a chord, and Leon finally began to consider the idea. Reflecting on the past, Keem admits that he's been drawn to Leon's ideals ever since they were kids. But back then, his own motivations were far less noble because he simply wanted to make a name for himself. Fast forward to the time when their party faced a Depth 7 Abyssal Beast, and we see Keem hold the beast down, giving Leon the perfect opening to finish it off with a single strike from his Seraphim blade. That decisive blow took the beast down instantly. It turned out the creature was a forest dragon, leaving their party stunned at how far they'd come as Seekers. Keem felt proud, thinking this victory would elevate their party, the Twilight Glade, to new heights. He even explained the name, saying it was what they originally called their group. But as fate would have it, the name never stuck because people started calling them the Winged Knights, inspired by Leon's flashy special wings ability. So Keem couldn't help but think Leon was the only one who truly stood out among them. Back in the present, Keem runs into Leon at another bar and confronts him about why he got so fired up earlier in the tavern. Leon honestly has no clue himself, so Keem speculates it might have been jealousy because some fresh Seeker, waltzing into Rockhard Beak, acting like he owned the place. Keem figures it'd be normal to feel envious, given how long it took their group to earn recognition there, and Leon is surprised that he hadn't even realized his own feelings until now. Shifting gears, he admits Noel is impressive and that his hard work deserves respect even if he doesn't approve of his methods. Keem, however, pokes at the idea, asking if Leon's really okay with letting some upstart kid surpass them. To drive the point home, Keem pulls out a letter. He explains it's from the Seekers Guild, urging skilled parties to form clans without delay. He also mentions that Vaclav and Ophelia received similar letters. Leon reveals he got one too, and he'd already invited the party to the tavern to discuss it, but Noel's antics had interrupted them. Keem adds that the others have agreed to leave the decision to Leon, and this catches Leon off guard, making him feel like he's not respected as a leader. But Keem brushes that off, saying it just saved them time. Then in the end, they agree that it's time to form a clan. The next day, Keem and Leon approach Harold to discuss their application, only to have it rejected. They confusedly ask why, pointing out that all their documents are in order and that they meet the qualifications. Harold explains that under normal circumstances they'd be accepted, but the impending battle with the Valiant changes everything because now they need people who are ready to fight immediately. Keem argues that this shouldn't be an issue, as they've already defeated a forest dragon. But Harold counters by asking why they didn't apply to form a clan right after such a feat, and he implies they lack the ambition needed to climb higher as Seekers. Keem then frustratedly demands to know why Harold sent them letters in the first place if he thought they weren't ready. But Harold surprises them by revealing that no one from his office sent any letters, so it must have been a hoax, so Keem is baffled, wondering why someone would do such a thing. But Harold, clearly uninterested in speculation, tells them their meeting is over and asks them to leave. But Leon is so determined and pleads for another chance. Harold relents, saying they can prove themselves by completing a test. To gain recognition as a clan, they must defeat a specific beast. And when they ask what the beast is, Harold reveals it's a mind-reading Dantalian from Abyssal Depth 8. Keem, though momentarily surprised, tells Leon not to hesitate because if they want to continue as Seekers, they'll have to face such challenges eventually, so Leon resolutely agrees to the task. But then Harold adds another twist. The test will be a competition. Another party whose application was also rejected requested a second chance, and Harold decided that only one party will be acknowledged as a clan, so whichever group completed the task first would earn the recognition. And as Harold finishes his explanation, the doors open and Noel enters the room, shocking Keem and Leon as they realize their rivals are blue beyond. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.